I have some lengthy notes, as usual, to read you. So firstly, I'll explain the process we'll be following this evening. In order to keep members and officers safe, there will be limited numbers seated in the council chamber. Therefore, some members will be seated in another meeting room at Chute End. Those members will be seen on screen and can hear everything that is being said in the council chamber. They will also be able to take part in any discussions. When any vote is undertaken, those members will come into the council chamber one at a time to state how they wish to vote on a particular item. All other members have been invited to join the meeting via Teams. These members can take part in any discussions, but are not entitled to propose, second, or vote on any of the items. As advised previously, all members, except those who have medical exemption, are expected to wear a face mask whilst in the council chamber and any other rooms in Chute End, and these may only be removed when speaking. Could I please ask you to ensure that any mobile devices or mobile phones are switched off? If you are participating via Teams, when you are not speaking or being asked to speak, please mute your microphones. If you do not mute your microphone, it will be muted for you. To assist people viewing the meeting, could everyone participating via Teams turn off their cameras and only turn them on when speaking, and also introduce themselves whenever they speak? To ensure the smooth running of the meeting, could members wishing to speak via Teams please use the hands up facility whenever possible? And please do not speak until asked to do so by myself. Could those members in the chamber please raise their hands whenever they wish to speak? Please note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. Just a reminder that members do need to stand when speaking in the chamber. Please note that to avoid the chat function on Microsoft Teams being used inappropriately, it has been disabled for this meeting. And may I remind everyone that I intend to adhere strictly to the timings set out in this constitution. Thank you. So do we have any apologies?
One apology, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Barry Patman.
Thank you. I think Councillor Barry.
And Councillor Graham Howe as well, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I am attending online.
I'm sorry, Mr. I thought it was in Rwanda, but obviously.
I am in Rwanda attending online.
Now that's dedication for you. So moving on, item 84, the minutes. I believe there may well be agreement for minutes. If there isn't, please can you signify? Councillor, sorry, my eyesight's bad.
Yes, it's Councillor Bishop first. Item P23, there's a statement put down as being Maria G's and it was actually mine.
I'm sure that's fine. It will be corrected. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. So what I'm intending to do, and you'll hear this a couple of times, is that with the agreement of everyone, I'll just take a vote of the members in the chamber, unless there are any councillors in the David Hicks room who do not agree with that. I'm looking, I can't see any movement there. Okay, so all those in favour of accepting the minutes as amended, please show. All those against? And all those abstaining? That's unanimous and carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 85, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Margetts.
I'm a non-executive director sitting on the board of Optalis and therefore will leave the chamber when item 95 is discussed and debated.
Thank you. Any others? Councillor Hussle.
I'm on Optalis Holdings as a chairman and director, unpaid.
And what is your declaration of interest, though?
It's a personal declaration.
Thank you. Councillor Kaiser.
Yes, I have the same declaration to make. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any others? I'm just looking around. No. Good. So now we move on to item 86. Only a couple of things, actually. Can I say thank you to everyone who's either donated or to be donating or providing auction prizes and actually bought tickets. I'm pleased to announce that we are actually sold out. 200 people will be attending what's going to be a fantastic night. And bearing in mind, this is the first such function since the major lockdowns. I think that's been an amazing achievement, wholly done by the charity. I'm still looking for auction prizes. So if you've got friends or have got a restaurant or whatever, please, who wish to donate a dinner for two, I'd like to hear from you. And the last thing then we'll get into the real business is I'm sure all my fellow councillors will join me in congratulating Her Majesty the Queen, who on the 6th of February became the first British monarch to celebrate a platinum jubilee after 70 years of service. An amazing achievement. Thank you. So we'll then move on to item 87, which is public question time. We do have a limit of 30 minutes. Can I remind that supplementary questions must relate either to the original question or the response that's been given there. And also, can I remind executive members that your response to questions must not be more than 2 minutes and supplementary questions 1 minute. I will be strict on that. We've got a lot of business to come through. So is Adrian Bettridge here, I believe? Would you like to ask your question, please?
Thank you. My question is the sum of the commitments to reduce CO2 in the transport section of the Council's Climate Emergency Action Plan is that by 2030, vehicle traffic will be reduced by 40% and levels of walking and cycling will be 250% and 450% respectively of their current levels. How confident is the Council in achieving this target based on the current actions and investment, and what further actions does it intend to take to improve this confidence?
Thank you for your question. Woking Borough Council has made a commitment to play as full a role as possible, leading by example as well as exhortation in achieving a carbon neutral Woking Borough by 2030. The Council has demonstrated this commitment by developing a clear and ambitious climate emergency action plan. The plan was prepared as a predictive tool that provides a clear picture on the scale of the challenge and the approach needed to reduce our carbon emissions. The Council's power to reduce carbon emissions are, though, limited, and we need to look at a wider picture where our role as a community leader and influencer will be equally, if not more, critical. More than half the emission cuts needed will rely on people and businesses taking up low carbon solutions, decisions that are made at a local and individual level. Many of these decisions can be positively influenced by having supporting infrastructure and systems in place. Reducing carbon emissions from transport is one of the biggest challenges in the borough. The Council is taking a holistic approach that will support our residents with both infrastructure and education and awareness programmes. The Council strives to engage and involve the community through events and educational activities such as cycle training, air quality monitoring, anti-idling campaigns, and through supporting our schools. We want our residents to adopt more active, sustainable ways of travel, and for this Council is increasing and improving the infrastructure through the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, the greenways and other initiatives, and working closely with public transport providers. The Council recognises that our current efforts alone are not sufficient to achieve these ambitious targets. The targets in the CAP are attributed to projects, though we acknowledge that they will need to be refined these targets as they progress and seek alternative and additional policies and projects over the coming years to meet the same level of CO2 reduction. To assist this, the low emissions transport strategy has been in development, which informs our targets in the CAP. The Council has set a very ambitious targets for its climate emergency agenda, and we continue to innovate and seek new opportunities to deliver our goals.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Do you have a supplementary, Mr. Bett?
I do. Thank you. I'm concerned that outside of what it says in the climate emergency plan, the Council's wider commitment to improving active travel rates isn't entirely clear or quantified. In contrast to the commitment to making driving easier, which is well funded and regularly publicised by executive members. Tonight's budget falls well short of the estimates in the climate plan for improving active travel, and that funding actually goes down in 2024. So my supplementary question is the whole of the council committed to increasing walking and cycling as stated in the climate emergency plan, or some other target? And if so, when can we expect to see this quantified as an objective for the council as a whole and see the resources put behind it?
I thank you for that. So there are a couple of different answers to what you've just asked. So the first is the entire council committed? Yes, we are. To give you some numbers, the amount of investment that we put into certain things, so foot and cycle routes, 1.5 million, safe school routes, 250,000, the LC width, 1.2 million, the A327 cycleway, 750,000, Borough Council cycling network, 1.5 million, and the cycleways with scape, 4.4 million. So we are investing across our community and across the different departments in our council in order to deliver against more active transport capability. The follow-up to your question is we need to change people's behaviours in order to get them more active in their transport. And that means providing different solutions to the journeys that they do at the moment, and that means understanding the need. And it also means looking at different behaviour change programmes that we can put in place to actively encourage our residents to get moving, get travelling in a more active way. We saw with Beat the Street last year, a very popular programme that got people out walking, schools in particular, but there are other initiatives that are coming in terms of behaviour change that we're working on at the moment. We'll be looking forward to announcing very shortly.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. So the next question is from Rebecca Fraser, who's should be asking her question virtually. Are you there, Ms. Fraser?
Yes, I am here.
Please go ahead and ask your question of Councillor Bath.
Thank you. Can you confirm that there will be a full public consultation for the proposal for 3D pitches to be built adjacent to the Maiden Early Nature Reserve before any planning permission is put in?
Rebecca, thank you for that question. First of all, I'd like to reassure you that we are still evaluating the best site option for this much needed facility in the community, following on from the initial site proposed by the Berkshire and Buckingham Football Association, which has been always in my mind an intention to bring back the most optimal site solution to executive after the full evaluation of options in the area. So we are still at a very early viability stage. Once we've determined and agreed upon the most viable site for the community at executive, I can assure you that there will be a full public consultation on the 3D pitch, and this will happen before any planning permission is permitted.
Thank you, Councillor Bath. Do you have a supplementary?
No, I do not. Thank you.
No, thank you for your question. So move on to Julie Freak. Are you there on virtual?
Yes, I am.
Okay, could you ask your questions, please? Okay, also Councillor Bath.
Good evening. Please could you tell us why Laurel Park is being favoured as a site for the new 3G pitch when it is quite clearly the wrong location and is facing fierce opposition from many early and lower early residents that use the park for all manner of recreation purposes, not just football? Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, for that question. And Laurel Park was favoured as a proposed site by the Berkshire and Buckingham Football Association. It was always my intention to carry out a full evaluation of options and issues to understand the optimal site for this important facility in the community. I've already referenced another potential option as Maiden Early School. Following this full options evaluation, the preferred site will be taken to executive for consideration so we can begin the formal consultation process.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Councillor Bath, is there a supplementary?
Yes, please. In the hope that it is indeed realised that Laurel Park is the wrong location, when and how will we hear that that is definitely the case and it be confirmed that it is no longer in the running?
I can't give you a precise date, but my guess is that we will complete the options assessments process by April, May, and then we'll bring that to the executive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bath. The next question is from Hazel Bell. Is she on virtual? Or is she here? Nope. So she'll get a written answer to her question, which was also, I believe, around the 3G pitch. So moving on is Anthony Crouch. Are you there?
Yes, hello, I'm here.
Can you ask your question, please, of Councillor Bath?
Yes, thank you. Re the Laurel Park 3G pitch proposal. If Laurel Park is the main focus, can you please highlight why this valuable park space, which is currently the main green area for the majority of our development, is being favoured? Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, for that question. As previously stated, Laurel Park was favoured as a proposed site by the Berkshire and Buckingham Football Association for the new 3G pitch. Following on from this, a full evaluation of options in the community are being undertaken, including surveys. The outcome of this options analysis will then be considered to determine the optimum site on which we will formally consult.
Do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you. That's very kind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on, Deborah Taylor. Would you like to ask your question, please? I guess it's also for Councillor Bell. We currently can't hear you. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
There are existing sites in the very close locality, literally within walking distance of Laurel Park, no emissions. Existing hard courts and floodlights are in place. One is Reading Football Club, which is based outside Wokingham Borough, with state-of-the-art training facilities at Bearwood, inside the borough, which is only 1.6 miles from Laurel Park. A condition of the planning approval for that site was that it opened for community use. Yet, in the WBC letter to residents received by very few residents, it stated that one of the groups that will use the 3G pitch will be Reading FC. There is a 3G 1.8 miles and another 3G 3.4 miles from Laurel Park. We are told grass pitches are running at full capacity. Yet you are intent on digging up 4 of those grass pitches. Grassroots. Will Laurel Park FC play their league games on a plastic pitch?
Thank you for your question, Deborah. Teams can now only use pitches for match purposes as long as they have the FIFA 5-star rating, of which 3G pitch is, as there's a high demand for a 3G pitch teams, because teams are having to travel long distances across the borough, and many are having to play out their games, home games outside of the borough. We are therefore clear that we need such a facility, a valuable facility in our community. What we are not clear is on the optimum site for it, which is why we are undertaking a full evaluation of options, as mentioned previously. Reading Football Club, you mentioned the community trust, which is one of the main users mentioned. This is a registered charity and is the community arm of the football club, engaging, developing and educating young people within various community groups in various locations in the borough. Officers have informed the planning department with regards to the question regarding the football club training facilities being utilised by them, and will look into this further.
Thank you, Councillor Bath. Do you have a supplementary question?
I do. Laurel Park FC have to travel just 5-minute walk to Maiden Early for their winter training, so that's not outside the borough. But the Football Foundation have a grass pitch improvement strategy. They state that the majority of football is still played on grass pitches. They also state improving these pitches are a priority, and to ensure affiliated football fixtures are played on a quality football pitch and keep grassroots football where it should be played. Guess where? There is a clue there. Yep, it's on grass, not plastic. The Football Foundation Grass Pitch Maintenance Fund provides grants also to enhance or sustain those pitches. This fund could be used to improve those grass pitches at Laurel Park and where grassroots football has been played for many, many, many years. I read that a 3G pitch has a 10-year life cycle. The council has limited resources. Maximise the use of the available funding.
Can I stop your speech? Could you? I'm going to give you.
The question is.
Right. Thank you. Can you get to your question?
The question is, Laurel Park sits in the middle of what, when it was built, is the biggest housing estate in Europe, surrounded by housing. So why can't you, don't you, enhance what is already there for the football community and let the wider community still enjoy what is at the heart of that community and for generations to come? This is what residents need and want. A 3G pitch at Laurel Park would not affect anything.
Can you allow the council? I've given you a lot of time. Can you allow the councillor to answer your question, please?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. I can assure you that we have, wherever we've tried to build 3 pitches, we have also improved the grass pitches as well. But there is a hell of a lot of demand for the 3G pitches because of the quality that these 3G pitches offer. And we are trying to meet that demand within the borough. We're trying to stop the teams going away from the borough to play their home games away from the borough. And therefore, we're trying to reduce our carbon footprint at the same time by building these facilities. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Chris Elliott, is he here?
Yes, I am.
Right. Would you like to ask your question, please?
Again, it's to do with the 3G pitch. Has a usage profile been done already? I.e., do you know how that area is currently used? And do you have a projected usage profile in the event that the 3G pitches go ahead?
Thank you, Chris, for that question. The current usage was a key consideration in the Berkshire and Buckingham Football Association initially proposing this site. The future use of the 3G pitch, wherever it will be located, will need to be formulated as part of the football development plan, which will be submitted to and agreed by the Football Foundation. As stated previously, following this initial proposal, we are undertaking an options analysis to arrive at the optimum site for the location, so it is yet to be determined.
Thank you, Councillor Bath. Do you have a supplementary?
I just want clarification. So you haven't done a current usage profile on the existing facility as it is today?
It will be done.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've just got time for one more question. Louise Timlin, are you there virtually?
Yes, I am.
Can you ask your question, please?
Sure, yeah, thank you. At the council meeting on the 20th of January, in response to a question from Councillor Kerr, Councillor Soane remarks that although the contract to provide support for domestic abuse victims was awarded to Cranston in July 21, we need to appreciate that time would be needed to find an appropriate property for a refuge. It therefore seems that the council were aware that it would take some time for Cranston to provide a refuge in Wokingham, and I asked that why, in that case, was provision not made to continue to provide funds to Berkshire Women's Aid in the interim period to continue to run their refuge in Wokingham.
Councillor Soane.
Thank you very much, Louise. The Wokingham Domestic Abuse Partnership Board and Network Group are proud to be working in close collaboration with over 40 voluntary, charity and statutory organisations. This includes making grant funding available to these organisations to help deliver local services and provision to enhance safe accommodation locally. As part of this work, the Council recognises that Berkshire Women's Aid is a key stakeholder and valued partner. We therefore continue to work in partnership with Berkshire Women's Aid to support them as a provider of safe accommodation in the borough. To add to existing safe accommodation provision, the commissioned provider, Cranston, and the Council continue to work together to address the challenge of finding an appropriate property.
Do you have a supplementary?
I do. I've been in communication with Berkshire Women's Aid, and I understand that they have to reach out to the council to ask to have funds to continue to provide the refuge in Wokingham, and they were told they needed to apply for an emergency grant, which is being provided from November last year to March this year. Does that mean that it's expected that Cranston will have a refuge up and running by March? And if not, will funding continue to be provided to Berkshire Women's Aid to run the refuge in Wokingham for victims of domestic abuse?
Thanks very much. I can't answer whether Cranston will have a refuge up and running by March. I would think not at this stage, to be honest. But the funding that we offer to the voluntary organisations, as far as I understand, will continue.
Thank you, Councillor Soane. We'll squeeze in the last question. Laura Taylor, are you?
Hi, thank you.
Okay, would you like to ask your question, please?
Yes, thank you. Another one about the 3G pitch, I'm afraid. So there are two 3G.
We believe you're muted. We can't hear you anymore.
Oh, hello, sorry. So there are two 3G pitches, one 1.8 miles from Laurel Park, one 3.4 miles from Laurel Park, and a number of facilities with floodlight facilities less than 1.5 miles away from Laurel Park, including Maiden Early School. Local players and members therefore do not have to travel far for training. Most of them are within a 5-minute drive. My question is, why are Wokingham Borough Council intent on digging up the only green space at Laurel Park by installing a 3G pitch, which will actually increase congestion and emissions in a small residential area and in the middle of a nature reserve? Thank you.
Councillor Bath.
Thank you, Laura. Don't be afraid about asking these questions because I'm here to answer them. And thank you for that question. The pitches mentioned above are all sand dressed or tarmac. Apart from one site, they are mainly not suitable for football training or matches. There is therefore an identified need for a 3G pitch in the community, as teams at present are having to travel across the borough and even out of the borough to play. Providing a local facility will therefore reduce emissions and congestion. I can assure you that the specific site options analysis I have previously referenced will include a consideration of the impact on congestion and emissions.
Do you have a supplementary?
No, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So that brings the public questions to a close. So we move on to item 88, petitions. I believe we've got two petitions here. Danny Arawala, would you like to present your petition, please?
Thank you. Good evening. Tonight, I present a petition with over 1,000 signatures, which is exactly 1,528 signatures against Wokingham Borough Council's proposed one-way system for Woodlands Avenue in Woodley. I live near Woodlands Avenue, and it is one of the busiest roads in Woodley and a major artery in and out of the town centre. Turning into one-way system would cause not only significant traffic congestion with large vehicles turning into narrow streets, but also severe disruption to residents and other road users. Some of the biggest issues it could cause include delays and lack of access for emergency vehicles, including the road being blocked if an emergency vehicle needs to stop over outside a house. The road is also likely to be blocked when there are courier deliveries, weekly bin collections and house moves. Residents on the town centre side of the Woodlands Avenue would have the two-way cycle route immediately outside their driveway, making it difficult in getting out of their driveway. Traffic being diverted through unsuitable smaller residential roads, which would increase pollution and delays. Businesses in Woodley Town Centre would struggle if customers choose to shop in other areas due to this one-way proposal, as it would make it more inconvenient to enter the main car park near Waitrose. Residents support schemes to build safer infrastructure for cyclists and pedestrians. However, the proposal would cause significant disruption to residents and other road users. I would like to thank the Woodley residents and shops that have helped collect the signatures for this petition. It's been a large community effort, and we request that this council reconsiders this proposal in the light of our strong objection and do not go forward with the proposed one-way system in Woodlands Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arawala. We've got another one. Councillor Yunus, would you like to present your petition, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm presenting two petitions on behalf of Save Our Ancient Rivers, commonly known as SAW, and is regarding the path of River Thames between Sonning, Thames Valley Business Park and Reading. Petition 1 urges WBC to protect the Thames path from the future development. This petition was undertaken last year as a result of the WBC's 2020 and 2021 local plans recommendation that the Thames path at Cannon Mouth held no recreational value and should not be designated as a local green space. So far, there are more than 2,200 signatures have been received for this petition, all strongly opposing any future road plans at Cannon Mouth. Petition 2 was submitted to WBC prior to the December 2018 Planning Committee, where members recognized the overwhelming public feeling against the East Reading MRT and rejected the proposal for the second time. However, the petition's comments remain a powerful document of the community's desire to preserve this beloved green space and is therefore submitted again. The number of signatories were of the similar size of the latest petition. Mr. Mayor, last year, WBC did listen and designated this land as a proposed local green space. However, it is also safeguarded for the strategic transport network improvements, notably a high-quality express bus service or mass rapid transit along the A4 and A324 in policy CC04 of the MDD 2014 local plan. These petitions urge the council to fully back the local green space designation by removing the appropriate policies or clauses from the local plan documents that call for the area to be safeguarded for strategic transport network improvements. By removing these clauses, Woking can improve the area for active commuting for cyclists, walkers, and for recreation, and make it less attractive for anti-social behaviour. Instead, the council should look at other viable options like East Reading Railway Station serving Thames Valley Park and Woodley. Mr. Mayor, this riverside space is a jewel in the crown of Woking. This area is most treasured by local residents. It has taken nature hundreds or if not thousands of years to produce the splendour that we witness today. This should not be thrown away lightly for a transport scheme of dubious value that can't show any plausible reduction in either congestion or improvement in air quality. Once the riverside is gone, it is gone. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Yunus. The actual petition sheets for both of those have already been handed in and will obviously be passed on to the relevant officers. So we now move on to the meat of the meeting today, item 89, the medium-term financial plan and associated reports. I'd just like to remind everyone we've got 1.5 hours to debate this item, and both group leaders are allowed to speak for up to 12 minutes each. So we'll be debating all 4 items at once, but when we do get to the vote, they will be independent votes, as is normal. So, Councillor Halsall, would you like to move the 4 reports, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's 3 years since you elected me as your leader. It's been humbling to have had the active and wholehearted support of a professional, dedicated and hard-working team of members and officers. I thank you all. It has truly been the honour of my life. It has been a very busy 3 years. It's been pretty much full on 24/7, during which making a positive impact on our community has always been at the forefront of my mind. It has been a pleasure to serve. We are a great local authority and we aspire to be the best. We have achieved huge accolades. We are one of the most prosperous, least deprived, healthiest, and one of the most desirable places to live. Our Climate Emergency Action Plan has been ranked 8th in the whole of the country. UNICEF has chosen us in a bid to be recognised as a UNICEF UK child-friendly community. We are only one of a handful in the country. In the last 3 years, we have brought forward an unprecedented number of policies and strategies. We have reviewed and renewed almost every aspect of the Council and renewed its relationship with partners across sectors and central government. We've continued to deliver substantial cost savings and service improvements. This has been despite COVID-19, which has dominated thoughts for the last 2 years. I have tried to lead from the front. I have courage to can-do, innovation, conscious that initiatives may not work, but believe they are always a source of feedback and learning. Our staff feel valued and supported to come up with new ideas and approaches. They understand the high level of aspiration and expectation. There's been a strong focus on promoting staff well-being led by senior officers. The only reason that we are here is to serve the residents, for whom our mission is to make them happier, healthier, and more prosperous. The tragedy of life is often not in our failure, but rather in our complacency, not in our doing too much, but rather in our doing too little, not in living above our ability, but rather in our living below our capacities. I have sought to reinvigorate everything we do, and we have. The recent peer review team in their feedback to us found we delivered valued, well-performing services, provide a high quality of life for residents. We achieve good outcomes for residents despite receiving no central government grant funding. Notwithstanding the recent pressures of COVID, we are financially stable. This did not happen by accident, but by the achievement of officers and members throughout the 20 years of Conservative administration. We have demonstrable resilience and financial probity. Over the last 3 years, despite COVID, we have made great strides in all key areas. For example, a clear vision for the borough and recognised corporate plan that is delivering the key priorities. Meaningful partnership relationships, including health and the voluntary sector. Focus on data and insight to improve decision making. Commitment to enhance and improve the customer experience. Significant and genuinely marvellous improvement within the adults and children's services, which are reflected in recent inspection visits. However, I'm not complacent. We are the golden thread which runs through our community. We will continue to develop, deliver and shape the future aspirations for the borough. The scale of the challenge is increased. I'm confident that I can lead the way to overcome whatever is thrown our way without reducing our services and without reducing momentum on reform where needed. We recognise this as a journey of continuous improvement. We are proud of our achievements through the COVID pandemic. We displayed organisational strength, resilience, and played a pivotal role in ensuring that the local community had the support it needed throughout, working in partnership with the brilliant voluntary and community groups. There has been a focus on deepening collective leadership between the executive and the corporate leadership team. This provides a strong foundation to build on. Officers and members have worked together to enhance our strategic capacity. We now need to continue to deliver great outcomes for all our residents in a way that promotes fairness, equality and diversity. We will restate a clear narrative about our ambitions for our residents and the future for Wokingham. Recognise the role we play in community and place leadership, and sometimes that means taking tough decisions. Continue to embed equality, diversity and inclusion for members and officers, and through the delivery of services. Ensure there is a commitment to a long-term vision for the borough, co-designed with partners. As you know, we have worked over many years to attain the highest standards of financial management, including a strong track record of delivery of significant savings. The financial future looks both extremely challenging and uncertain. The degree of uncertainty is at a level seldom, if ever, previously experienced. The financial impact of the adult social care and NHS reform is potentially the greatest concern, given its magnitude. Additional expenditure of between 20 and 30 million are anticipated when the impact of the reform is fully felt. Whilst the ongoing grant funding of this is unclear, the current levels of financial support will fall well short of that needed by Wokingham and other authorities with a high proportion of self-funders. A 3-year funding settlement was expected for the financial year 2023, 2022 and 23 and beyond, but unfortunately only a 1-year settlement was announced. This leaves considerable uncertainty over our funding after 2022-23. A major review of local government funding in the context of levelling up agenda is expected to be announced. Wokingham will need to continue to make its case for a fair deal for its residents in the formulation of the new national funding system. Currently, we receive the lowest level of support per head in the country. The new homes bonus is substantial, reflecting the scale of development in the borough. We are concerned that it may disappear. Inflationary pressures on both revenue and capital have become both severe and unpredictable. Inflation in this budget has been carefully considered, but we live in extraordinary times, and it may be understated. The government is consulting on changes to what local authorities must charge their general fund for capital borrowings. Wokingham has embarked on a responsible and ambitious capital programme over its recent past to enable the strategic delivery of housing, the regeneration of Wokingham Town, and the development of much-needed affordable housing. There is a risk of adverse consequences, and we will have to review our approach to housing delivery. Regeneration, the provision of affordable housing, and holding assets for the purpose of income generation. The dedicated schools grant budget area is highly regulated, which means the opportunity to address the growing demand-led statutory pressures relating to SEND is limited. The deficit of DSG is likely to increase significantly in future years. It is estimated to be 13 million by the 31st of March 2023. Options to mitigate the deficit are currently being developed, and some may require additional capital investment to deliver them. The budget proposals put forward for 2022-25 are responsible and affordable, leaving a safe level of general fund balances. However, this MTFP is being put forward in an unprecedented landscape of uncertainty and risk. Our financial position will require continual review, and there may be a need to undertake some form of mid-year budget review. The administration has demonstrated its capacity to navigate through the extraordinarily difficult waters of the pandemic and still come in at budgeted levels for 21-22. It is vital to do the basics right, to provide the capacity and financial flexibility to continue to invest in our community and to build social homes in response to the increase in homelessness. We must be strong and financially resilient, providing high levels of services for residents. In these perilous waters, we must always maintain robust control of our finances and prudently forecast given the uncertainty of future government funding. We are not in crisis, unlike many. The SIPFA financial resilience indicator showed Wokingham to be amongst the top 20 out of 300 councils in the country. We went in this pandemic with excellent cash reserves due to 2 years of excellent conservative cash management, but they will still be maintained. We will reluctantly have to reduce these reserves, but they will still be maintained at a sustainable level. Reserves are to support the residents in time of need and hardship. And if any member feels that this is not one of those times, I suggest you look at the havoc wreaked by this pandemic, not just in Wokingham or even the UK, but worldwide, and the personal misery. Think about those who have died before their time and the families facing uncertain times. So yes, we have spent money to ease the suffering and uncertainty of our residents, delivering the services they rely on. Would I do the same? Yes, 100% yes. Wokingham is a great place to live. More and more people want to live in the borough. I regret the loss of every field, tree and hedgerow. Whilst landowners promote their land and developers know they can sell every house they build, it makes it difficult for us to balance the need for new homes with the needs of existing residents. I've managed to materially reduce the number of homes, but I still believe the quantity is too high. Nevertheless, having a plan is the best of the choices available to us. Creates upfront funding of SDLs for high quality infrastructure and has enabled us to oppose speculative development. Rising prices and rents make it increasingly difficult for those on low incomes and next generation to acquire or rent homes in the borough. We have a responsibility to help residents. More social homes are required. We have started the medium-term financial plan on a firm footing and the budget is sound, but we must recognise the unfavourable winds around us. Mr Mayor, I'm recommending the budget to the Council, a budget that contains substantial investment in vital services for the community and contains no cuts. It is safe and prudent and will ensure that we continue to deliver the high quality services the residents have come to expect and rely on. As my friend and colleague, the Executive Member for Finance and Housing has said on many occasions, a council which is broke is no good to anyone. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Mr Mayor, I will second that.
Thank you, Councillor Kaiser. Just before we move on, just want to draw members' attention. There are some additional sheets that on your desk. These are filling in the sort of gaps, etc. as normal. Do you wish to speak now, Councillor Kaiser, or reserve your right?
I will speak now, Mr Mayor, if that's okay.
Feel free.
Thank you. I mean, this year's proposed budget is cautious, and I'm pleased to see we will not be cutting any services. We've tried to keep fees either at a minimum or where possible, like car parking charges, not increase them at all to help the borough's economy recover. We as a party do not take the decision to raise council tax lightly. But with inflation running at over 5%, it's been a difficult decision this year, especially as the rising cost of living is impacting everybody. The past 2 years have been tough for everyone, and the COVID-19 pandemic has affected us all, with the impact being felt far and wide, not just locally. To assure residents, not only do we have the highest rate of council tax collection in the country, but we do it with humility and respect for residents. If you don't believe me, this is a quote from Wokingham Citizens Advice. They were saying overwhelmingly positive about the engagement with your council tax team, saying that they are super responsive, always helpful with any requests, and are regularly seeing residents sent their way for further debt support, not just to try and get the council tax. Wokingham Borough Council has ploughed additional money into the community during the pandemic, from supplying much needed PPE equipment and support to care homes, schools and social care, as well as support to the community organisations like the £1 million we agreed last January to fund things such as free school meals during the school holidays. We also helped to administer much needed grants and discounts, nearly £80 million. This was on top of the furlough scheme, which paid out tens of millions of pounds direct to residents in the borough. The impact of the pandemic is still being felt by Wokingham Borough, but we remain in a good place financially. This is despite facing uncertain terms of government funding and adult care reforms. This is a robust and balanced budget for 2022-23, and after all, I should know. It is only possible due to a position of financial strength, even despite us being the lowest funded unitary authority in England. Sound finances must underpin everything this council does for its residents, being rated, as we hear, in the top 20 in the UK. Despite very little support compared with other authorities, our strong reserves and successful financial planning has made it possible to support the community through COVID. But I'm glad it shows ambition as well, to improve services and meet needs of the most vulnerable, to prioritise social housing and deliver even more homes at social rent, as even affordable homes in this borough no longer are within the reach of people on low income. COVID has seen an increase in the number of people struggling to make ends meet.
And in this case, a lot of them are seeing homelessness. The budget sees the council reducing its cost to a more efficient, sees it reducing its cost to be more efficient.
Councillor Kaiser, I'm afraid I'm going
As
to have
I've
to stop
said,
you.
a
I'm going to
broke
have to stop
council
you
is
there,
no good
please.
to anybody.
Please,
Thank you,
thank
Mr.
you
Mayor.
very much. So we'll now move on. Can I have hands up for those people in the chamber who wish to talk? You will have 3 minutes, except for the Councillor Jones will have 12. What was the helpful host? Just bear with us. It's rather a lot of hands up. While we're completing the names, are there anybody in David Hicks who wish to speak? Can you please keep your hands up? I'm trying to multitask here. Anybody in David Hicks wishing to speak, please? Silence. I suggest the chamber. And any councillor who's participating virtually, do they want to speak? Can you put your hands up, please? That's just in the chamber. Okay. So I'm going to start off with Councillor Jones. You have 12 minutes to speak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The last 2 years have been difficult for our residents, struggling to cope with the effects of the COVID pandemic. I want to thank all of the staff at Woking and Borough Council who have during this time worked diligently to continue to provide the council services that many in our community rely on. Many others in our communities have also worked extremely hard to help their employers keep their businesses afloat, often adapting to new ways of working, such working from home, with many having to balance this with homeschooling. Thanks also to everyone who has helped our NHS and care homes to continue to provide high standards of care. Many have battled through quite horrendous times in the last 2 years. Life as an NHS professional was very different back in February 2020 to what it is now, while adult social care employees have throughout continued the vital work of looking after some of the most vulnerable in our society. Wokingham Citizens Advice, our food banks and many other charities have also worked tirelessly to support our residents. We all hope that the coming months we'll be able to see a return to some form of normality, in whatever form that manifests itself. However, we know that many in our communities will continue to face significant challenges. The Liberal Democrats are firm supporters of social housing. With the looming cost of living crisis, the need for affordable, decent quality homes is more acute than ever in the borough. We welcome the fact that the council works in partnership with our council tenants to deliver our housing service, and that they have been consulted on the housing revenue account budget. We're also pleased to see that the council has started to look at adapting its housing stock as part of work on the climate emergency. However, we are surprised that the report says absolutely nothing about the major decision that went to the executive tonight to bring the Gorse Ride regeneration project back into the housing revenue account. According to the executive agenda, the budget
for this is over £105 million. And there is an expectation that funding it will involve additional housing revenue account borrowing of 37.5 million. Not only is this not in the HRA report, but it is also not in the Treasury Management Strategy, which on page 111 of the agenda, and again on page 125, gives the HRA figures for the next 3 years without any mention of the possibility of more borrowing for Gorse Ride. Failing to include significant borrowing does rather make a mockery of the papers in front of us tonight. Essentially, you're asking us to approve a 3-year Treasury management strategy, which you know contains incomplete information. We are all facing a cost of living crisis. Increases in energy costs are hitting our residents hard, with many having to suffer an increase of over £700 a year. High energy costs, high increases in inflation, increased taxes on business and employees will all take their toll, hitting our most vulnerable residents the hardest. The government's proposal to reduce council tax for bands A to D will help some residents in a small way, but it's nowhere near enough. Pensioners have had their state pension increases limited to 3.1% now that the Conservatives have scrapped the pensions triple lock introduced by the Liberal Democrats. Inflation is, however, now over 5%, so they are losing income. Interest rates have just had their first consecutive rises since 2004. Commentators say there is much more to come. The next 18 months could be very difficult for homeowners with mortgages. The Bank of England predicts inflation will reach 7.5% in April. All these cost increases will hit our residents. They will also hit the council. We are already seeing the effects of increases in inflation at Wokingham Borough Council. We share the concerns of the Chief Financial Officer that we are in unprecedented times of uncertainty. We therefore must keep inflation budgets constantly under review. Increases in energy costs have hit budgets, and cost increases in raw materials in the building industry has resulted in cuts to the council's capital programme. I'm thinking of the Twyford Library that appears to be on hold following a 20-year plus campaign by local Liberal Democrats to get a new library. It's on hold, it appears, because of a relatively small amount of money. The crematorium project was scrapped. Increases in building costs mean it is no longer viable, but has the original need for a crematorium in Wokingham gone away? I think it probably hasn't. So are the Conservatives fit to be in charge of our borough finances? Conservatives are driven by dogma. A few years ago, their ideology said that outsourcing of services was the key to solving all of our ills. They set up Optilist and outsourced PPP. Neither worked well, and we have had to radically change them. Luckily, we now have an excellent management at Optilist, which is putting it back on track again. The council is bringing PPP back in-house, but there is a substantial one-off cost of £300,000 in 22-23. Substantial additional revenue costs in the next 3 years are being provided for organisational transformation or change, including 3.4 million in adult social care and 3.7 million in children's services. These and other costs are predicated substantially or wholly on savings in future years. We welcome additional spend to save and to deliver improved services, but we ask, how long have issues that require change existed, and how long have overspends been going on for? How much of the spend is due to the unravelling of the 21st Century Council process so soon after it was implemented? How will hard-pressed staff cope with yet more changes? All these scenarios put pressure on the personal finances of our residents, especially the lower paid and the vulnerable. It is therefore incumbent on us as councillors to minimise the council's council tax increases. Our difficulty is we have less government funding for the next financial year. In fact, there has and will be a massive decrease in funding relative to costs that the council is expected to cover. The new homes bonus is a grant from government to encourage house building. Despite plans to meet increased building targets, the new homes grant from the government has decreased from 7.5 million in 2021 to 4.8 million in 22-23. And coming down the road is the galloping elephant of the social care reforms that have the potential to bankrupt the council and other councils unless they are fully funded by the government. If we are running the council, we would broadly abide by this budget envelope, but within that envelope, we would have different priorities to the Conservatives. We would look at ways of helping local businesses to recover from COVID. Mental health and well-being will be a priority for all ages, especially children's mental health. We would commit the council to seek white ribbon accreditation. We'll push for affordable, safe travel options. We'll review the system of discretionary payments for residents in crisis. We'll ensure effective out-of-hours support for residents in crisis that ensures no resident is forced to sleep rough. We'll invest in implementing the LC whip and ensure public money spent on climate emergency projects have fully costed business cases. We will push ahead with our idea of a COVID memorial wood as a place where residents can remember their friends and family members who have been lost to COVID. Mr. Mayor, this evening, Liberal Democrat shadow executive members will give some details of what we might do differently to the Conservatives if we were running the council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So I'm now going to call Councillor Fruin. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to thank all those that have produced this impressive set of documentation. The background, history, rationale, theory and process overview sections are extremely comprehensive. The issue for a layman such as myself is, of course, it makes it very difficult to see some of the important details. Learning from last year's budget meeting, I will point out I am not an accountant and I don't profess to be, so there's no need to have a discussion about who has the biggest qualifications. As a layperson, I need to be able to trust the data in this documentation to be able to trust the recommendations. If I look at simple things such as page 53 in the Green Book, I see planning team managed circa 4,000 applications, yet on page 60, it's 3,500. Even on such a simple piece of data like that, my trust in these figures is being challenged. Much is made about efficiency and savings and performance. In page 42 of the Green Book, it refers to 62 KPIs. I sit on the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, and we are still waiting to see the KPIs for Q2 of last year. And I understand the reasons for some of that, and I'd like to understand what performance indicators have been used to establish the forecast within this budget. Because if they are 9 months out of date, that takes us before or into the middle of COVID, and I'd like to understand how we've affected the impacts of COVID on these figures. Much again has been made by the leader about being the golden thread through everything that our residents do. I'd like to ask the council if within this budget and within the next period, we can actually look at the quality of the homes, not just affordable homes, but homes that people purchase and homes that our tenants live in. My inbox and much of my time is spent on poor quality housing. We have residents that live in mouldy, damp conditions, have children with serious health issues that are being reported to me by GP surgeries. Not just one case, but multiple cases. So can we have a focus within this on ensuring that all the homes at all levels are built and constructed to a quality which makes them livable? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fruin. Can I call on Councillor Burgess, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'd also like to thank the officers for the many hours of hard work that have gone into producing these detailed budget documents. The cost of living crisis is already starting to bite, with rapidly rising food bills, petrol prices soaring, real wages falling and energy bills spiralling. People are feeling the pinch. And it's the Conservatives who have caused the energy crisis, with 12 years of failing to properly regulate the energy market and 12 years of stalling on renewable energy and home installations. Their buy now, pay later solution is just giving with one hand, but taking it all back with the other later on. With central government too busy continually dealing with shameful Boris Johnson-related misdemeanours, the government that Conservative members here campaigned for continues to pile the financial pressure on ordinary people, and they're set to make it worse. They've already cut universal credit by £20 a week. In April, they press ahead with a national insurance rise, something even many of their own MPs are strongly against. And now we have a council tax increase. Council tax rises are not the solution to the long-term pressures facing councils like Wokingham, and we shouldn't have to pay for Conservative incompetence. And this puts the pressure not just on Johnson, but on his Conservative councillors to take real action to genuinely help residents who are struggling. It puts the pressure on them to be genuinely anti-poverty, not just helping people to live with being poor, to accept their fate and become resilient to it. As for the detail of this budget, we have the usual Conservative greenwash. In the introduction, place and growth has been renamed environment, greenwashing a budget that in reality includes things like the local plan, housing and even highways. We're spending £36 million on new roads next year, and the roads and transport budget is 3 times the so-called climate emergency budget. And we have a budget in here of £90,000 for climate emergency deliberative processes that offer no opportunity for participants to engage with experts. And as officers have admitted, they do nothing to stop ideas being generated that have little impact or won't work. They could have run a democratically legitimate citizens' assembly for less than £90,000. But instead, we have this shameful waste of public funds, a pretence at proper engagement, which is poor value for money. And what's worse, it's only being spent for political reasons. That £90,000 could have been spent on adult social care. We are told no services are being cut, but the budget is littered with the usual references to demand management. Take adult social care. Demand management savings of £6 million over 3 years. That's £6 million worth of activity that will no longer be in place. If it looks like a cut and it feels like a cut, it is a cut. But to sum up, creating additional financial burdens for hard-hit residents when finances are so stretched cannot be the way forward. It's time the Conservative Party backed local authorities rather than starving them of funds, and removed the need for this additional tax rise for our council taxpayers at a time when the cost of living crisis is really starting to bite. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Can I call on Councillor Grandison, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this year's budget has been perhaps the most challenging that we have seen in many years, a point that seemed to have been made quite considerably more often than not in the last decade. As we've seen in the past 10 years, our national government support has continued to shrink, and now the vast majority of this council spending is covered by our council tax and local rates, almost 95% in the documents before us tonight. And yet, for the past decade, this Conservative administration has delivered balanced budgets and has kept the general fund reserves at a sustainable level of between £8 and £10 million, if my memory is correct. But my comments this evening are not around that. It is to talk about the effort that goes into the creation of this budget. And this process started in the autumn last year, and I know for a fact it started much earlier than that in the summer with the officer team. The Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee scrutinised this entire budget in its in its creation at the strategic level, with meetings starting in September to go over the budget in detail, covering children's services and adult services in great detail, together with the capital programme. Members of the committee asked questions of large capital bids, the process to get to good in children's services, and the challenges that are facing adult social care that could appear in the next few years with changes to social care. And as a result, we witnessed the creation of a balanced budget by the executive and the officer team working tirelessly behind the scenes, and I thank them for that. I also thank members of the committee and outside of the committee for coming and asking the questions and getting that process done. The scrutiny process is good for democracy, and it is good for this council. It allows visibility into the budget setting process and allows the executive and officer teams to validate their decisions to members on what needs to be spent and what needs to be rationalised. A process that's sadly been sorely missed at another of our councils down the road. Mr. Mayor, I commend this budget, and having witnessed its creation and scrutinised the process in public meeting, we've created a good budget that will deliver more than the core services our residents need and will continue to make Wokingham a fantastic place to live, do business and raise a family. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grandison. Can I call on Councillor Shenton, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the fabled medium-term financial plan and my first attempt to pore over its entrails. I'm no stranger to financial documents, with spells in my working life reporting to a director of a multi-billion multinational and holding a directorship myself. But I found the MTFP to be impenetrably arcane. It's a public document, yet how many residents would actually understand it? It's opaque in its openness and open in its opacity, but I have gleaned some crumbs. Wearing my sport and leisure hat, I see £600,000 next year for the famous 3G pitch at Laurel Park, despite evident opposition from residents and a dearth of consultation so far. But isn't that twice the sum approved by the executive as the council contribution? I then note that subsequently there is money for a pool at Arborfield, yet there appears to be no money to assist those in our community with a constrained income to use our leisure facilities, especially as their income is about to be even more constrained. Wearing my environment hat, I see the council expects savings of £350,000 per year from food waste diversion from blue bags to food caddies, without any indication of how that will be achieved. And I observe that tree planting attracts a sum of £271,000 next year and zero thereafter, which seems meagre for the objective of getting 250,000 trees in the ground. No mention, though, of the COVID memorial wood that Liberal Democrats have proposed. Additionally, I do not see a penny allocated to address the ecological emergency, as if biodiversity will magically heal itself with no help from us. But of course, there are greenways, attracting almost 3 million over the 3-year span, sitting curiously in the section headed climate emergency, despite officers repeatedly telling me that it is a leisure project that is not intended to reduce carbon emissions and has no target. Greenways, more like greenwash. I could go on, but I won't because I see the amber light and I don't want to incur the wrath of the mayor. So I will say that this is not the budget that we would be writing because our borough deserves better.
Thank you, Councillor Shenton. Can I call on Councillor Margette, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Adult social care in Wokingham has had 3 major focus points over the last 3 years: improvement of services, good financial management and campaigning for our residents' interests. We spent a lot of time significantly improving our financial forecasting. Our aim of this was to identify possible overspends earlier when there was time to correct them and to ensure we always balance the budget. This has been achieved over the last 3 years and I have every confidence it will in the future. Adult social care nationwide faces a 4% rise in costs every year due to the increasing age and needs of our population. We embarked on our demand management programme, which you've heard mentioned tonight, 2 years ago. The aim of this is simple. We identify need earlier, bring demand forward and reduce the need for last-minute expensive care, saving money and improving services. The annual Wokingham rise in care costs is now 2% rather than the 4% it previously was. Our aim is to improve our services so we're in the top 25% in the country. We've revolutionised our relationship with the voluntary sector. We've commissioned the voluntary sector to provide services which it can do better than the council. The approach has seen key partners increases in funding and longer contracts. I was so proud to open a new voluntary sector hub in central Wokingham with you, Mr. Mayor, last month. We've set stretch performance targets to all parts of the department with the aim to challenge our staff to continually improve. We've renegotiated our relationship in Optalis with RBWM. This has resulted in a better company, fully focused on service and quality, as well as £2.5 million of efficiency payments to WBC. Our COVID response led to the One Front Door service with the CAB, the befriending service with the Link, and the Wokingham food delivery service with First Aid, amongst many other things. When our community needed help, we rose to the challenge and responded. We've always tried to be proactive in taking the big decisions and acting in the interest of Wokingham residents. In the COVID pandemic, we tracked back 2 significant care home outbreaks to discharges from the Royal Berkshire Hospital. When they refused to guarantee COVID tests on every discharge, we refused to take patients until it could be shown they were COVID negative. This was done to protect our care homes. We were one of the first councils in the country to do this. We've campaigned vigorously for a standalone walk-in vaccination clinic in Wokingham to improve access for our residents. It opens in the Wokingham Library on Saturday. When face-to-face GP services were recently withdrawn from Burma Hills, we lobbied the CCG that this was unacceptable. I'm pleased to advise we've secured a commitment that these services will resume as soon as the vaccination clinic at Burma Hills finishes. The CCG have a habit of backsliding on this, and we will hold them to account. We've also lobbied the CCG for many months over the substandard service offered by the Wokingham Medical Centre, and we will not stop until there's some improvements. So in summary, Mr. Mayor, a department committed to high-performing services, keeping finances under control, and passionate about campaigning for our residents. We have a track record of high performance, an ambitious future programme, a history of taking on the big decisions and getting them right.
Run out of time, Councillor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I call on Councillor Hare, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Councillor Margate says, adult services is an area where we want the best for Wokingham residents within financial constraints. But as Councillor Burgess has said in her speech, some of the targets seem stretching, to say the least, and really hard to achieve. We'll see if they're met, but I'm not at all sure they can be. On the other hand, I think it's great the increased financial security given to the voluntary services with the longer term agreements. I personally would like to see even more invested in this mainly preventive work, but I've advocated that for 30 years. At least it started to happen, and thank you. But I'm also concerned about work with people who have dementia, as we all know, an increasing problem. Some of that will be taken with a new Suffolk Lodge, having a dementia unit and taking people which other care homes are not suitable. And certainly that's something which I've got experience of this week, finding a place for someone with dementia which is advanced. But I'd like to see too, more work done with people in early stage dementia, something else I'm working with someone with, a preventative measure that will maintain people's quality of life as long as possible. And I believe that's important too. But as Councillor Jones said, coming galloping down the road, and as far as I could see, not included in the budget, are the payments to be made toward the cost of people using adult care once they reach a threshold. There'll be increased costs of measuring this threshold, of appeals about how much people have spent, as well as regulating the appropriate amounts of payments to service people in care homes for their care, whether this meets the total cost of care minus the accommodation cost or not. The cost of these increased payments might be over £20 million. It could be as much as £26 million. That is an astonishing increase. But as we know, this is because many Wokingham residents have resources and are currently paying all their care home costs. Apparently, the government has offered Wokingham a paltry £3 million to cover costs in excess of £20 million. We must remember that this is a Conservative policy. That is the same party, I believe,
as a ruling group on this council. So however much they bleat and say this isn't fair, they must take at least some responsibility. The excess of cost over income will surely bankrupt the council. The idea of the Conservative government bankrupting our council seems mad, but that is the present scenario, and I'm afraid the government seems to have other things on its agenda at the moment. I would like the voluntary sector to have more money. I would like more to be targeted to dementia, especially in its early stages. But as I've said, the elephant galloping down the road is not being recognised. It's the
Councillor
care home
Hare,
payment.
your time is up. Thank you very much. Can I call on Councillor Smith, please? Wayne Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought I'd reflect on some of the points made this evening and just talk to the local plan very briefly. I would thank everybody in the room for encouraging residents to respond to our local plan growth strategy. We had over 2,700 responses, and that's up by over 2,000 on the previous growth strategy when we were consulting on Graiseley. I would also like to confirm, and I know this has been done by several of my colleagues, including John Kaiser, who went to the meeting yesterday, that Pinewood is not on our agenda for housing. So can we please get it off the script, because it is not happening. The other point I would like to mention is that over the last 2 years, however much you like housing or not, I know it's a very, very sensitive issue, but we have had contributions from developers of over £84 million. Yes, some of that money has been invested in roads, and I've heard this evening that's quite sensitive as well. But if you look at the projects that we made and we've invested on, we've invested 40 million in major projects, including £16 million at the North Wokingham Distributor Road. We've also invested 12 million at 9 Mile Ride Extension and around the former former Arborfield Garrison. Also 8.9 million towards the South Wokingham Distributor Road. The Shinfield East Relief Road, £2 million. 1.3 million towards the Winnish Relief Road. In education, £9 million has gone to St Celia's Church of England School, with a further 5.2 million to the Farley Hill Primary School at Arborfield. Also, a £1.1 million to the building at Addington for their sixth form building. That's just on education. And then we go to living, playing and travelling sustainability. £5.6 million has gone to the Gorse Ride regeneration programme that was mentioned earlier. Also £3 million towards affordable housing that includes, once again, Gorse Ride, Finch Road in Earley and Middlefields in Twyford. The redevelopment of the former Carnival Pool in Wokingham, that received 2.8 million. 1.5 million went to the School Green Community Centre at Shinfield. The sustainable routes and the open to pedestrians and cycle route, they've also received 1.2 million. The council have also invested £1 million on parks and open spaces, including 313,000 at California Country Park and 130,000 at Cantley Park and 313,000 at California Country Park and 113,000 at Cantley Park. So as you can see, however you like housing, it does bring good investment and it is making this borough a place where people want to come. But I do take on board all the points that have been made around the local plan, and we will be looking at those and coming back to you all in due course once we've had time to go through them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Can I call on Councillor Bishop?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you work in a vital but low-paid job, life in an expensive area like Wokingham is challenging. It's even more difficult for those who can't work because of unemployment, poor health or caring responsibilities. And the current cost of living crisis means that too many of our residents are falling into poverty. Wokingham Borough Council needs a much more ambitious and compassionate approach to supporting our residents who are living on lower incomes. The Liberal Democrats will ensure that more affordable and high-quality social housing is built for Wokingham residents. We'll push for affordable, safe travel options for those who can't afford to travel by car. We will engage with schools to do everything that we can to ensure that essential school costs, including uniform, are made affordable for all parents. We'll ensure that residents have the support which they need to claim the benefits to which they're entitled and to provide resources to help them avoid or address problem debt and build financial resilience. We need an urgent review of the current system of discretionary payments for residents in crisis. We also need to offer real support to residents who are struggling to pay council tax and other arrears of money owed to the council. Other councils have found that a compassionate and pragmatic approach safeguards council budgets as well as helping residents. For our most vulnerable residents, we will ensure an effective emergency out-of-hours support service for residents in crisis, which ensures that no resident is forced to sleep rough. Turning to libraries, arts and culture, these add enjoyment and meaning to our lives, and the Lib Dems will work to open participation to as many of our residents as possible. Wokinham's libraries are an essential community resource, particularly for young residents and those living on lower incomes. They provide access to books, information, access to the internet, and quiet study space for our residents. The Lib Dems will work to make our libraries even better, and in particular push for as many of our libraries as possible to open on Sundays and have evening opening hours. Twyford has waited too long for its new library, and delivery of this is a Lib Dem priority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bishopworth. Can I call on Councillor Murray, please?
Mr. Mayor, when listening to the opposition in this and previous years, it would be easy for a member of the public to mistake this meeting for the budget debate of a failed communist state or that of a bankrupt socialist council such as Slough. The simple truth here is, though, that despite the opposition's doom and gloom and their attempts at headline-seeking soundbites, the very simple truth is that each and every councillor in this chamber is extremely fortunate. We're fortunate, Mr. Mayor, because we're here tonight to debate a budget that is investing significantly into our future and into our community. Unlike some nearby councils, we have a budget that is balanced. Again, we have a budget that is not cutting any services. We have a budget that proposes a below inflation council tax increase because here in Wokingham, we can both choose and afford to support our residents while other aspects of their cost of living increases. We have a budget that does not, like other councils nearby, require us to sell £300 million worth of our own assets, like leisure centres or country parks, in order to service debt or fill a budget shortfall, as our nearby neighbours in bankrupt Labour-run Slough are doing. And we have a sound budget proposed by councillors elected from among the residents, not one imposed on residents by a state-appointed administrator because of an incompetent council. Tonight, we debate a budget to build solar farms, plant trees, reduce waste and increase recycling, a budget that continues to help residents reduce their carbon footprints and their energy bills via the Help to Heat scheme that has already benefited over 1,300 households across our borough. This is a budget that opens libraries while other councils are closing them. It invests into infrastructure like schools, greenways, cycle paths, active transport, reducing congestion, improving air quality, protecting green spaces, and building play parks, community hubs, and leisure centres. This is a budget that is regenerating communities such as Gorse Ride, is investing in social housing that will enable our borough to become a UNICEF UK child-friendly community, and that is boldly aiming to make poverty a thing of the past in our community. We're able to do all this because of sound financial policies and over 20 years of balanced budgets created by this and previous Conservative administrations. Each of us in this chamber has ideas and projects we would like the council to fund. We debate tonight is differing views on where to prioritise investment. And what we hear from the opposition is not a new budget, but simply their view on how they would want to reprioritise council investment. They, however, don't have the opportunity to benefit from our army of expert role specialist officers that they repeatedly praise in this chamber. Each of us in this room should be grateful that Wokingham isn't in the same financial dire straits as some of our neighbouring authorities. Our opposition may never admit this out loud, but I, for one, am hugely grateful for 20 years of sound Conservative policies. Without them, we'd most likely be here tonight debating an above-average inflation council tax increase and what assets the council needs to sell, rather than what infrastructure initiatives and ideas we can choose to invest in. All I can say is, thank God for the Conservatives.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Debay.
Glasses, microphone, right, okay. There are many things that I welcome in this budget, but we would not be doing our job as opposition councillors if we did not make it clear where we thought things could be done better. Quite simply, if it was within our gift, there would be many things that we would look at differently. We have concerns about the 14.1 million gap in the capital programme that has no funding allocated to it. It says that this will be covered by reducing and reprofiling capital expenditure over the next 3 years. I can't remember when this gap has been this large, and I'm not sure how much can be squeezed out of this council to cover it. This also does not include any details of carry forwards from the current year, which I cannot believe there will not be any. With the divorce from the PPP contract, I only see extra funding for those services for 1 year. I understand that there is an ambition to keep it within its existing budget, but I'm not convinced that this will be the case, especially as we are being promised something better than what we currently have. With no extra funding for bus services, I'm wondering if the Conservatives and this government are serious about its commitment to tackling climate change. What has happened to the Conservative plans to build a better bus service that this borough so desperately needs? How are we going to persuade people to leave their cars at home if there is no alternative transport? Wokingham Town Centre regeneration was supposed to start paying back to WBC long before now. I am glad to see we are at the beginning of getting something out of this, but I thought this funding was to be used to develop other town centres. So what is the plan for this? I am also concerned that the construction costs are rising, and I'm wondering how this will affect our capital programme for the work that has not yet been started. On top of this, there is the large elephant running down the road towards us, as mentioned before, in the form of the adult social care costs. And this will arrive due to the £86,000 care cap for all residents in all residents. We are expecting it to rise to over 20 million a year, but I see no plans here to step up and meet that demand in this budget. Is this government going to find a realistic way to find the funding for our local councils for this service without piling hundreds of pounds a year onto our council tax bill? We are aware that the valuation of some of the council's assets have declined over this pandemic. One example is the Carnival Pool car park. While I don't think we are planning on selling that car park, these items do affect the council's ability to borrow money and to cover its debt. If realisable asset values go down. With a combined total of internal and external borrowing of 633 million this year, it feels like we're still heading down a dangerous path. It is on this basis that I do not feel that this council is really managing its strategy as well as it should. I understand it is unprecedented times, but we really need to be doing better than this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Shepherd-Bay. Can I call on Councillor Munro, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I'd like to do is just pick up on a couple of points that were discussed about how more support could be given to businesses. I think that's what Councillor Jones said. Well, being involved in that process, and you should know because you come from some of the meetings that get called, we've given relief of over 80 million, Mr. Mayor, and we're still administering grants right now towards the end of March. So I don't think we can do an awful lot more. The cost of supporting these businesses has been huge, and lots of them have been saved. In fact, one business came to me and to Councillor Kaiser and said, "Thank you, you saved my business and probably my family." Now, these are sort of heartfelt things that have been said by the business of this borough. We've also done lots of other things too. We've created a digital newsletter being distributed to over 5,100 businesses on a regular basis. We've carried out our engagement with over 1,300 businesses as part of our COVID response since January 2021. We established a COVID Marshal Service. Now, that might not be very helpful to businesses, but it is, because it helps the businesses to operate safely and to instill public confidence in the economy when they were really quite concerned. We signpost businesses to the Berkshire Growth Hub, who have launched free coronavirus advice services to further support local businesses, the Coronavirus Information and Resource Portal, and free one-to-one advice sessions. We've assisted business to access lateral flow testing facilities to help keeping their employees safe and their business operating. And if that's not enough, another thing was mentioned earlier, We've delivered a free to residents of the borough new town centre and working, and we are looking at other areas of the borough where we can invest where possible. And now I'm pleased to confirm that the asset value is well in excess of the debt, with some world-class leading facilities such as a carnival hub soon be completed. What's not to like about these facts, Mr. Mayor? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Can I call on Councillor Fishwick, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This country, along with the rest of the world, has gone through and is still experiencing the impacts of COVID. This has influenced and changed the behaviour of how we live, work and spend our leisure time. This means that we all spend our day differently to what we used to, especially in how we travel. Whilst car travel has returned to near normal overall, the travel patterns during the day have changed with more of a flatter number of trips. However, public transport, bus and rail, has not seen a similar recovery. The bus area is served by a mixture of commercially operated services as well as supported routes. Bus services are very vulnerable and heavily reliant on paying passengers and are not going to recover to pre-pandemic levels without additional support. This would lead to the inevitable reduction in service provision and commercial routes not being viable. Public transport is in the midst of an unprecedented change, and this council must adapt quickly to grow patronage and to meet the shift in travel demand. This is not reflected in this budget, and without it, bus services will be cut. The Liberal Democrats will be planning now to support and grow these essential services that feature strongly in the Climate Change Action Plan, where bus patronage needs to be doubled. This won't happen with this budget. Unfortunately, parts of this council's budget still remain in the 1970s era of thinking, with 12 million of an original 20 million left for tackling congestion. Yet its own Climate Change Action Plan states there will be a target 40% reduction in car travel by 2030. In addition, the use of the road will dramatically change soon, with a strong likelihood of a road pricing to plug the emerging 35 billion hole in the Treasury's budget. Therefore, this vital funding is wasted on something that won't be there and is needed elsewhere. The Liberal Democrats would reallocate this funding, as we said in 2019, and continue to repeat it, to active travel to reduce the 60% of short car journeys and support and grow our public transport system. Forward thinking for our future travel. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Can I call on Councillor Yorkenston, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm pleased to yet again be able to announce a record programme for highways and transport in this year's MTFP. We recognise that congestion affects many people's ability to move around the borough and are investing 36 million in new roads, cycleways and footpaths. We have another 18 million allocated to our congestion management programme over the next 4 years and have started making improvements to our intelligent traffic signals and signs and taking other anti-congestion measures. We're increasing the number of traffic-sensitive streets, which means these roads can't be dug up during the rush hour, which should ease issues. I don't know whether Mr. Fishwick actually ever drives during rush hour, but I can assure him the rush hour is still alive and well in most of our borough. We have a great record of providing new paths and cycleways to encourage alternative transport and have an unprecedented programme of £10 million of cycleway and path improvements to help those who are able to get out of their cars. And this includes work to link up Observer with Shinfield Cycle Path and a new Bardaway cycleway and bridge. We're also working hard on the new bus service improvement plan. Although bus usage has dramatically reduced since COVID, which makes service improvements very difficult to sustain. Whilst the Lib Dems say we're going to plan now, we're actually acting now. We have just at Executive approved an additional bus funding whilst we wait the result of the central government bus service support grant replacing the COVID bus support. So we're actually doing something about it. We're investing another 9.5 million capital in next year in maintenance and improvements to current highways infrastructure, everything from drainage and flooding to resurfacing, lighting and signals. We've also allocated £2 million to reactive maintenance such as pothole repairs next year. We know antisocial parking and resulting road safety measures issues are a real problem for residents, and an increasing number of parking officers to provide extra resource to be better able to address these issues. Finally, in recognition of the Queen's Jubilee, I'm pleased to announce that we will be providing free residential street closures to encourage the party spirit.
Thank you, Councillor Jorgensen. Can I call on Councillor Mary G, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm focusing here on the Treasury Management Strategy and Capital Programming Strategy, specifically the minimum revenue provision, the policy of this council. There's a current government consultation on the ways in which the MRP on the capital financing requirements is calculated. In calculating a prudent provision, local authorities are required to have regard to issued guidance. The current consultation on MRP states, and I quote, "Statutory guidance is clear that financing for investment assets and capital loans requires provision to be made." The practice of this council differs from that guidance. Most significantly, the MRP related to capital loans is nil, and the MRP related to assets that can be disposed of for appreciation, including investment properties, is 0.67% per year, capped at 10% in total. Post-pandemic, the council cannot be sure that assets will appreciate or that losses will be limited to 10%. Some assets purchased using the Property Investment Fund dropped in value to March 2021. Barclays Bank in Marketplace dropped by 39%, Mulberry Business Park by 20%, and Denmark Street by 17%. Who knows what 2022 will bring? The three-year capital programme contains much to commend it, but includes £33 million investment in commercial property. The government consultation makes it clear, and I quote, "Where an authority has been excluding debt related to investment assets or using capital receipts in lieu of a prudent revenue charge, the effect will have been to reduce that charge. The proposed changes will therefore result in increased MRP charge for those authorities in future." That's us. This statement prompts questions about the affordability of any borrowing associated with that 33 million. As councillors, we should have at the forefront of our minds, should the MRP rise, income available for service provision will reduce. I would draw council's attention to the recent case of Surrey County Council, which relied on appreciating assets to pay off borrowing associated with them. In fact, their investment property values had fallen by 24%. When their auditor looked at Surrey's MRP policy, they said that, though the policy was in line with legislation, it was, in their view, imprudent. The policy of this council is very similar to that of Surrey. I think Councillor Murray should have listened to Councillor Housel when he talked about taking a different approach to housing regeneration and income-bearing assets, because I think this is what he's referring to. Will Councillor Murray be so bullish next year? I think not.
Thank you, Councillor G. Can I call on Councillor Soane, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, as already has been stated, it's been a very difficult year for every council. But Woking and Borough Council has faced these challenges and been able to continue to offer outstanding services to our residents. With no cuts to our services, we have proved that with exceptional financial management, we can continue to be financially sound authority. In my role as Executive Member for Neighbourhood and Communities, I'm delighted to say that our library services have continued to outperform many other local councils. Nationally, since 2010, 846 libraries have closed. In Wokingham, we understand the importance of our library service. Libraries are not just for borrowing books, they are a community hub that offer services that appeal to all age groups. We continue to invest in our libraries, unlike many other authorities. Yes, the Twyford Library has been delayed, and this was because of considerable increase in the cost of the refurbishment from the original estimate. That's the action of a responsible council. Would Councillor Jones wish that we just go ahead and spend our residents' money without looking for savings? as well as all this, we're expanding our public protection service to ensure the needs of our residents are met. We are a council that improves our services and puts our residents first. I fully support this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Sloan. Can I call on Councillor Kerr, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This document, the medium-term financial plan, is a public-facing document. It needs to be comprehensible. So let's play a little game of where's the money gone. We will start with Barkham Solar Farm. Last year, the MTFP had a capital budget line called Solar Farms Additional Projects, with £18 million of spend evenly split over 3 years. In September of last year, this council approved the spending of £20 million to build Barkham Solar Farm without a business case going anywhere near scrutiny. So I was a bit bemused to see in this year's capital programme just £2 million assigned to Barkham Solar Farm when building hasn't commenced. I had to go to the head of corporate finance to get an answer. The capital budget that was profiled for years 2 and 3 of last year's budget was brought forward to the current financial year with the exception of £2 million, but a further £2.3 million reprofiled from another budget line. Are you keeping up with this? However, this capital funding has not been spent this year and we understand will be reprofiled in Q4 back into 2022-23. The way this data is presented conveniently avoids any mention of it in the MTFP. How on earth is a member of the public supposed to understand what this council is doing with its finances? It's a similar sorry saga with the managing congestion line previously in the climate emergency section of the capital budget. Previous MTFPs have said we would be capital spending £20 million in total, with £12 million of this in 2022 to 24. Strangely, the budget line in the capital programme this year has miraculously disappeared. Another call to the head of corporate finance reveals that the council still intends to spend this extravagant sum, but has been reprofiled in a way that means it does not need to be shown in the MTFP. And there was me hoping this council had listened to the concerns of the opposition and scrapped this spending. That was obviously wishful thinking on my part. This administration is targeting a 40% reduction in car mileage in the borough by 2030 through a number of measures, including ones that lead to a huge increase in walking and cycling. Spending £20 million of climate emergency funding on a project with no carbon savings to manage an issue that is set to be solved by other means is beyond lunacy. But then in this budget, this administration is not committing the finances to put in those other measures. There is a huge hole in the budget for delivery of the local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, the LC WIP. The 5-year projection of just £2.4 million against it won't cut it. It says £38 million in the Climate Emergency Action Plan. A Liberal Democrat administration would invest in implementing the LC WIP and would ensure that public money to be spent on climate emergency projects has a full business case, is fully scrutinised, has carbon savings associated with them and is transparent. I think it's time for a new administration.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Bath, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, the budget presented by the leader is a robust and balanced budget, despite the challenges we faced during the COVID-19 pandemic. Wokingham Borough regularly tops national polls as the healthiest place to live. That, Mr. Mayor, is down to the best leisure services in the country that we offer to our residents. And we are very aware that the quality of our leisure services play a significant role in enhancing the well-being and enriching the lives of our residents. Mr. Mayor, this Conservative administration has invested heavily in our existing leisure projects with more than £50 million invested or committed include the following: £14.5 million on Bullmarsh Leisure Centre, £4.9 million on Ryesh Green, Arborfield Leisure facilities, £2.1 million on California Country Park enhancements, £2.2 million Loddon Valley Leisure Centre improvements, £800,000 Embrook 3G pitch, £320,000 Cantley Park Greenway enhancements, £23 million, that's on Carnival Hub Leisure and Culture Centre to be completed in the summer of this year. £2.5 million Cantley Park 3G pitch and sports enhancement. £2.4 million Dinton Pastures Activity Centre and £800,000 Arborfield Primary School 3G pitch. Mr. Mayor, our borough is growing, and we are rising to the challenge of meeting the health and well-being of our residents by putting together a well thought out leisure strategy and providing excellent leisure facilities for our residents. I therefore commend this budget to the Chamber. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barr. Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Back in 2018, which is one council 4-year cycle ago, the total budget for special educational needs and disabilities was 9.5 million. This year, it's over 15 million, and it will reach 16.4 million in the financial year 2024-25. So back in 2018, overspending in the high needs block, with the bulk of which is SEND money, led to the schools block grant being £290,000 in deficit. Today, that deficit is 8.6 million, and it is predicted to double to 17.9 million by March 2025. In other words, in 3 years' time, the accumulated deficit in SEND funding will be bigger than the entire SEND budget. There is not enough money in the national pot for SEND. Wokingham is, as usual, particularly badly off. The council has suffered 2 blows this year. The government only allowed us the minimum percentage increase in the high needs block funding, whereas many other councils got more. And secondly, the Department for Education has delayed our new SEND school. That delay matters. Both the average cost of educating a child at an independent SEND school and the number of pupils have risen. So the overall cost for an independent school SEND provision has gone from 6.4 million in 2018 to 9.4 million now. Those 75 places at a state-funded SEND school would have helped us keep that spending down without compromising any child's education. The delay in the new school also affects the SEND home to school transport budget, which has gone up by 45% in just the last 2 years to 3.34 million. Having a new SEND school in the borough in 2022 would have cut down the journey length for a significant number of children, thus not just reducing the transport bill, but also improving their experience of getting to and from school. SEND is only one area where Wokingham struggles to get adequate funding and where we have suffered from decisions made by the government, as we've heard even from the leader of the council this evening. The Conservative government, that the Conservatives on this council campaigned for and support. What with lockdown parties and contracts for cronies on top of such low funding, it's not surprising that many traditional Tory voters in our borough think they are being taken for granted. And I think the Conservatives may be in for an unpleasant surprise in May.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Councillor Conway, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Whichever political group runs the council faces considerable financial challenges. Inflation, looming social care costs, and an inadequate level of support from central government make the task of paying for services and securing desirable capital projects very difficult. I acknowledge that this budget needs to be seen in that context. I also acknowledge that it contains many features that we support. Even so, we have some weighty concerns about the current budget, as previous speakers on our side have indicated. We regard some of the anticipated savings in the medium-term financial plan as overly optimistic, and some of the expenditure projections as likely to be exceeded. We believe that the capital programme, while it has fine ambitions, invests too much in commercial property at a time when its rise in value is very uncertain. We're concerned that as the government changes its guidance on minimum revenue provision for financing investment assets and capital loans, the council will face more demands on its revenue. We worry that not enough has been done to protect those of our residents on low incomes for whom the council tax rise will be very challenging. We know, of course, that the political arithmetic on the council means that this budget will pass. If we were to inherit this budget, we would work within its spending envelope to pursue our priorities. Community projects such as the new Twyford Library and the Montague Park Community Centre would be delivered sooner. We would seek to secure more high quality, affordable social housing for borough residents. We would offer more support for bus services and more encouragements for active travel by making better provision for cyclists and pedestrians. Without a reduction in car journeys, the council has no chance of meeting its climate emergency plan objectives. We would want to ensure that money spent on climate emergency projects was based on a full business case, including a carbon saving assessment, and had undergone rigorous scrutiny. We would create a COVID memorial wood to help meet the council's tree planting ambitions and to commemorate those in the borough who lost their lives in the pandemic. We look forward to presenting our credentials to the people of the borough as a responsible and responsive alternative to the current administration.
Thank you, Councillor Conway. That is the end of the list. I'll do one quick sweep around to see if anybody who's not spoken yet. So if you haven't spoken, you want to speak now, please put your hand up. Yeah, Angus. Is there anybody in David Hicks?
No, thank you.
Thank you. And anybody on virtual? In that case, I'll go straight to Councillor Ross, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The leader of the Liberal Democrats and Councillor Conway there and others have presented an interesting list of schemes they would fund if they were in power. They said the council tax level was in general agreed. So why did Councillor Jones and others not indicate what services they would not fund that are included in this budget? This budget enables the council to fully fund its statutory services and this leaves precious little for other services. It's a pity that unless we understand what the Lib Dems won't fund, how can we evaluate their proposals? I support this sound and balanced budget as prepared by the Conservative administration. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Councillor Halsall, you have the right to reply of 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, spend. Where is the income going to come from? You must be truthful to the residents.
Excuse me, Councillor Halsall. Please do not interrupt. It's not. It's actually quite rude. Carry on, Councillor Halsall.
Spend. But where is it going to come from? You must be truthful to the residents. In opposition, you can look both ways at the same time, but you can't if you aspire to the administration. The importance of the time for appraisal we give to overview and scrutiny, particularly about the budget, has increased significantly over the last years. The transparency and debate have not delivered the dividends of constructive engagement that I'd hoped for, as some of the debate this evening has demonstrated. At best, it has given rise to some fundamental information, coupled with financial illiteracy. For example, we will not have borrowings of 750 million. Our net current borrowings are closer to 170 million, with realisable assets of well over £1 billion.
Point of order. I forget what thing it is, and it's the one about misleading and false information, which is that nobody said 750 million, not a single person.
Councillor Bray, the point of personal explanation is based around something that you would have said that has been misinterpreted, not a general one. So please, you've made your point now, but if anybody wishes to do it, please, the rules are that you can only have a point of personal explanation to clarify something that you have already said in a speech which has been misinterpreted by something else. Thank you. Carry on, Councillor Halsall.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We will not have borrowings of 750 million, as the Lib Dems have said over the last few years. Borrowings are closer to 170 million, with realisable assets well over £1 billion. We will not be building 16,000 new homes. Actually, it's for 15,513 over the next 20 years. The period is 1st of April 2018 to 31st of March 2038. 3,900 already built, and a further 8,900 are remitted, adopted, or allocations or impulsed. The actual plan number is 3,910. So the statements made are just untrue, fake news, and do the council a great disservice in their dissemination. To reiterate, we are a great borough and have achieved huge accolades. We are in the vanguard of economic. Do you want to see where it's new homes? Almost every household, 16,000 new homes. It's just not true. It's a lie. So the statements made are just untrue. We are in the vanguard of economic development within the high-tech and performing arts sectors, and to attract RBH relocation. This did not happen by accident, but by the achievement of officers and members throughout the 20 years of Conservative administration. As you know, we have worked over many years to attain the highest standards of financial management, including a strong record of delivery of significant savings. The financial future looks both extremely challenging and uncertain. The degree of uncertainty is at a level seldom, if ever, previously experienced. This administration has demonstrated its capacity to navigate through the extraordinarily difficult waters of the last few years and still come close to budgeted levels. We must be strong, financially resilient council, providing...
Councillor Halsall, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Did you add the time I was interrupted?
Yes. So we're going to now move to the votes. There's going to be 4 separate votes on each item, dot 1, 2, 3, and 4. The normal process will be that it'll be a recorded vote for each one of them. And when we get to the medium-term financial plan, just remind you it includes those 2 extra pieces of paper that were with you. So I'll hand over to Susan to start the vote.
It's the voting on the Housing Revenue Account Budget 2023. So Sam Akhtar, for, against or abstention.
Councillor Akhtar. For.
Councillor Baker.
Abstain.
Councillor Bash.
For.
Councillor Rachel Bishop-Furr. For. Councillor Blumenthal.
For.
Councillor Bowring.
For.
Councillor Boyt.
For.
Councillor Bray.
For.
Councillor Burgess.
For.
Councillor Chadwick. Councillor Cheng.
For.
Councillor Conway.
For.
Councillor Cunnington.
For.
Councillor Dennis.
For.
Councillor Ferris.
For.
Councillor Firminger.
For.
Councillor Fishwick.
For.
Councillor Fruin.
Against.
Councillor G.
For.
Councillor Granderson.
For.
Councillor Halsall.
For.
Councillor Hare.
For.
Councillor Hellier-Simons.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor Kaiser.
For.
Councillor Kerr.
For.
Councillor Loyes.
For.
Councillor Maher.
For.
Councillor Malvern.
For.
Councillor McGetts.
For.
Sorry. Councillor Charles McGetts.
For.
Councillor Rebecca McGetts.
For.
Councillor Mather,
4.
Councillor Mickleborough,
4.
Councillor Munro,
4.
Councillor Murray,
4.
Councillor Rance, Councillor Ross,
4.
thank you. Councillor Sargent,
4.
Councillor Shenton,
4.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Debay,
4.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Debay,
4.
Councillor Smith, Caroline Smith,
4.
Councillor Chris Smith, Councillor Wayne Smith,
4.
Councillor Stone,
4.
Councillor Swaddle,
4.
Councillor Eunice.
4.
So it's agreed, recommendations agreed. We move to the second recommendation, the Capital Programme and Strategy 2022 to 25. Councillor Akhtar,
Councillor Akhtar, please.
okay. Councillor Baker,
Abstain.
Councillor Bath,
4.
right. Councillor Akhtar,
4.
Councillor Rachel Bishop-Firth,
Abstain.
Councillor Blumenthal,
4.
Councillor Bowring,
4.
Councillor Boyd,
Against.
Councillor Bray,
Abstain.
Councillor Burgess,
Against.
Councillor Chadwick, Councillor Cheng,
4.
Councillor Conway,
Abstain.
Councillor Cunnington,
4.
Councillor Dennis,
Abstain.
Councillor Ferris,
Abstain.
Councillor Firmager,
4.
Councillor Fishwick,
Abstain.
Councillor Fruin,
4.
Councillor G,
Abstain.
Councillor Granderson,
4.
Councillor Halsall,
4.
Councillor Hare,
4.
Councillor Pauline Holly-Sons,
4.
Councillor Jones,
Abstain.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen,
4.
Pauline Jorgensen,
4.
Councillor Kaiser,
4.
Councillor Kerr,
Abstain.
Councillor Loys,
4.
Councillor Maher,
Abstain.
Councillor Malvern,
Abstain.
Councillor Charles McGetts,
4.
Councillor Rebecca McGetts,
4.
Councillor Mather,
Abstain.
Councillor Mickleborough,
Abstain.
Councillor Munro,
4.
Councillor Murray,
4.
Councillor Rance,
4.
Councillor Ross,
4.
Councillor Sargent,
4.
Councillor Shenton,
Abstain.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Debay,
Abstain.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Debay,
Abstain.
Councillor Caroline Smith,
Abstain.
Councillor Chris Smith, Councillor Wayne Smith,
4.
Councillor Bill Soane,
4.
Councillor Alison Swaddle,
4.
Councillor Shahid Yunus.
4.
Recommendation carried. Recommendation Treasury Management Strategy 2022 to 2025. Councillor Akhtar,
4.
Councillor Baker,
Abstain.
Councillor Bath,
4.
Councillor Rachel Bishop-Firth,
Against.
Councillor Blumenthal,
4.
Councillor Bowring,
4.
Councillor Boyd,
Abstain.
Councillor Bray,
Against.
Councillor Rachel Burgess,
Abstain.
Councillor Chadwick, Councillor Cheng,
4.
Councillor Conway,
Against.
Councillor Cunnington,
For.
Councillor Dennis,
Against.
Councillor Ferris,
Against.
Councillor Firmager,
For.
Councillor Fishwick,
Against.
Councillor Fruin,
Against.
Councillor G,
Against.
Councillor Granderson,
For.
Councillor Holsall,
For.
Councillor Hare, Councillor Helena Simons,
For.
Councillor Jones,
Against.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen,
For.
Pauline Jorgensen,
For.
Kaiser, Councillor Kaiser,
For.
Councillor Kerr,
Against.
Councillor Abdul Boys,
For.
Councillor Maher,
Against.
Councillor Malvern,
Against.
Councillor Charles McGetts,
For.
Councillor Rebecca McGetts,
For.
Councillor Mather,
Against.
Councillor Mickleborough,
Against.
Councillor Monroe,
For.
Councillor Murray,
For.
Councillor Rance,
For.
Councillor Ross,
For.
Councillor Sargent,
For.
Councillor Shenton,
Against.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd de Bay,
Against.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd de Bay,
Against.
Councillor Caroline Smith,
Against.
Councillor Chris Smith, Councillor Wayne Smith,
For.
Councillor Bill Soame,
For.
Councillor Alison Swaddle,
For.
Councillor Eunice.
For.
Recommendation agreed. And the final recommendation, medium-term financial plan 22 to 25. Councillor Akhtar,
For.
Councillor Baker,
Abstain.
Councillor Bath,
For.
Councillor Rachel Bishopworth,
Abstain.
Councillor Blumenthal,
For.
Councillor Bowring,
For.
Councillor Boyd,
Against.
Councillor Bray,
Abstain.
Councillor Burgess,
Against.
Councillor Chadwick, Councillor Chang,
For.
Councillor Conway,
Okay. Abstain.
Councillor Cunnington,
For.
Councillor Dennis,
Abstain.
Councillor Ferris,
Abstain.
Councillor Firmager,
For.
Councillor Fishwick,
Abstain.
Councillor Fruin,
Against.
Councillor G,
Abstain.
Councillor Granderson,
For.
Councillor Holsall,
For.
Councillor Hare, Councillor Helena Simons,
For.
Councillor Jones,
Abstain.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen,
For.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen,
For.
Councillor Kaiser,
For.
Councillor Kerr,
Abstain.
Councillor Loys,
For.
Councillor Maher,
Abstain.
Councillor Malvern,
Abstain.
Councillor Charles McGetts,
For.
Councillor Rebecca McGetts,
For.
Councillor Mather,
Abstain.
Councillor Mickleborough,
Abstain.
Councillor Monroe,
For.
Councillor Murray,
For.
Councillor Rance,
For.
Councillor Ross,
For.
Councillor Sargent,
For.
Councillor Shenton,
Abstain.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd de Bay,
Abstain.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd de Bay,
Abstain.
Councillor Caroline Smith,
Abstain.
Councillor Chris Smith, Councillor Wayne Smith,
For.
Councillor Bill Soame,
For.
Councillor Alison Swaddle,
For.
Councillor Shahid Yunus.
For.
A recommendation agreed.
Thank you for all your efforts there. We move on to item 90, the interim polling place review. Do we have a proposer? So do we have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Jorgensen. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Jones. Can you speak now, please?
Yes, very briefly, this is to make a permanent change to the polling stations for Maiden Early and Hillside. These polling stations were tried last year in new locations of which are not in schools anymore, and it was very successful. That change was due to COVID, and because it was so successful, we'd like to continue this as a permanent change. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jorgensen. Councillor Jones, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
No, I'll speak now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Very pleased to second this. It means that there will be no disruption to schools in Hillside and Maiden Early. So very happy to second it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody want to speak to this proposal? No. Is there anybody in David Hicks' room that wishes to speak to this proposal?
No, thank you.
And anybody on virtual? Nope. So therefore, Councillor Jorgensen, you do have a right of reply.
No, just to thank Clive very much for seconding.
Thank you very much. So I believe there's an agreement from all groups that I can ask only members in the chamber to vote on this item. So I need to just check on the David Hicks room. Is there anybody there unhappy with just votes from the chamber?
Everybody seems happy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please show. All those against, please show. Abstain. That motion is carried. So we move on to item 91, which is the redesignation of polling place. Do we have a proposer on this? Councillor Swaddle. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Jones. Councillor Swaddle, would you speak?
Okay, I'm proposing this report to the council on the redesignation of polling places. However, please note that the Coronation Ward, it should be St John's Church Centre, Woodley, not the church itself.
So I need to have a show of hands, please, that this alteration is fine. All those in agreement, please show. Thank you. All those against? Abstain? Nope. So that change is now permitted. Carry on, Councillor Swaddle.
I've nothing more to add. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jones, do you want to speak now?
I will. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Very happy to second this proposal, but would just like to note that at some stage we would like to see a polling station in Wokingham Without that isn't in the school. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wishing to speak to this proposal? No. Again, I believe that there's agreement from groups, but I need to check with David Hicks. Is there anybody in David Hicks that would be unhappy if we just restrict to the vote into the chamber? Nope. So I'll go straight to the vote then. All those in favour, please show. All those against? All those abstaining? So that is also carried. So we now move on to item 93, which is the whole council elections. Sorry, 92, electoral review arrangements. Do we have a proposer? Councillor Halsall, do you have a seconder? Councillor Kaiser. So can you please now speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd hoped that we would be able to put this item forward with cross-party support. Sadly, the leader of the opposition declined. It would have given the Local Government Boundary Commission a powerful message. My understanding is if we achieve consensus amongst the council, it carries a lot of weight for them. The recommendation is the establishment of a cross-party working group. To ensure all the groups represented in political lands, we would have had to have a group of 18. This is clearly impractical, so I've had to ask the Independent and Labour group to share the vote to enable us to have a working group of 9. The current undertaking is the shape of the borough in 2028, which really is an officer exercise based on currently anticipated development, and the number of councillors we believe that should be elected. I believe that these are relatively uncontroversial and hopefully will give a unanimous position to the LGBC. If not, it is clear that the individual group submissions will be required. I propose these recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall. Councillor Kaiser, do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
Not really, Mr. Mayor. I mean, this is just kicks off the procedure for the boundary review, so I've got really nothing else to say. Thank you.
So I'm assuming that's you're not reserving the right to reply. Thank you very much. I wanted it to be clear. Anybody who wishes to speak, please keep your hand up. Okay. Is there anybody in David Hicks that wishes to speak?
No, thank you.
Okay. So, Councillor Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This paper states that if the council draws up a submission on council size and warding proposals impartially, it's possible those proposals will be adopted by the Commission. For one, a politically balanced working group will not be impartial because the ruling group will win all of the votes. And second, contrary to what Councillor Hussell was saying, the Boundary Commission placed no weight on things voted through by council. They go on the quality of the evidence. It's nothing to do with whether things go through council. I've checked that directly with the Boundary Commission. They did tell us that in the briefing that we all received as well. And also, as you've already noted, Labour and the Independents are sharing a vote on this. So we've known about this review for months. It's a once in a generation change to our borough, and suddenly we're being rushed into a working group with a few weeks to go on one of the decisions. So we in the Labour group don't support the working group as set out in this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The Liberal Democrat group supports the establishment of a cross-party working group to compile a submission to the Local Government Boundary Commission. We agree that there is a need for wards to have roughly equal numbers of electors and that the new wards should reflect local communities. We are in favour of consulting residents, but this must be a balanced consultation, not a one-sided consultation. We note that since June 2021, there have been informal dialogue with the Local Government Boundary Commission. However, other than a briefing from the Commission and a short conversation with the council leader, there has been no involvement with opposition councillors who account for over 40% of the council. The timetable is short and rushed, and that's not a great way to do a review. We don't understand the Conservatives' insistence of having a majority on the working group. What are they afraid of? Why not 10 members with equal votes? After all, the Conservatives will have a chairs casting vote. We would like to put the Conservative group on notice. We will not be railroaded into agreeing to Conservative proposals. If agreement cannot be reached, you should be in absolutely no doubt that a minority report will be sent to the Local Government Boundary Commission. The Commission have stated they aim to build a strong relationship with the council under review. This can only be done if they fully engage with the opposition as well as the Conservative leadership. Item 4.3 says the council has drawn up a submission on council size and warding proposals impartially. How can this be impartial when no opposition councillor has been involved in this? We also don't agree that the quorum should be 5 councillors. This means the Conservative members could meet and determine actions without reference to any opposition councillors. I suggested a quorum of 5 from at least 2 political parties, but the Conservative leader refused that. The executive summary says there is evidence that whole council elections provide for better longer term decision making. Where's the evidence for this assertion? And why have only the Conservatives seen it? We will be supporting the proposal for a working group, but want our reservations with this process clearly out in the public domain. And we don't want one-sided consultation coming out of this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Do another sweep. Is there anybody on virtual who wishes to speak on this? Can't see anyone. Anyone in David Hicks? Last call.
No, thank you.
And anyone in the chamber? Otherwise, I'll go back to Councillor Jorgensen for your right of reply. Oh, sorry, Councillor Holsall.
I'm really confused by Clive's response, because I think you're mixing two issues. We are on item 92, not 93. We're not talking about warding. We're talking about two very simple issues. One is the shape of the borough in 2028 and the number of councillors. That's all we're talking about. All the rest is actually the next item, 93. So if I could just recommend to the council that we set up a working group. It is cross-party, that it's 9 members. The Liberals and Independents have to share a vote, unfortunately. Otherwise, we have to have an 18 Liberals. That would be helpful. So the rise of Labour. Anyway, and that's all the recommendation is. So if I could put that to the council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Also, can we go to the vote? All those in favour of the recommend? Sorry. So this is a recorded vote. So David Hicks, can you please, and Sam, you'll be ahead of the queue. So I'll hand over to Susan for the call.
Okay, Councillor Akhtar, for, against or abstention?
For.
Councillor Baker?
Abstain.
Councillor Bath?
For.
Councillor Bishopworth? For. Councillor Blumenthal? For. Councillor Bowring?
For.
Councillor Boyd?
Against.
Councillor Bray?
For.
Councillor Burgess?
Against.
Councillor Chadwick? Councillor Cheng?
For.
Councillor Conway?
For.
Councillor Cunnington?
For.
Councillor Dennis?
For.
Councillor Ferris?
For.
Councillor Firmager?
For.
Councillor Fishwick?
For.
Councillor Fruin?
For.
Councillor G?
For.
Councillor Granderson?
For.
Councillor Halsall?
For.
Councillor Hare? Councillor Hilly-Simons?
For.
Councillor Jones?
For.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen?
For.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen? For. Councillor Kaiser?
For.
Councillor Kerr?
For.
Councillor Loyes?
For.
Councillor Maher?
For.
Councillor Malvern?
For.
Councillor Charles Magetz?
For.
Councillor Rebecca Magetz?
For.
Councillor Mather?
For.
Councillor Mickleborough?
For.
Councillor Monroe?
For.
Councillor Murray?
For.
Councillor Rance?
For.
Councillor Ross?
For.
Councillor Sargent?
For.
Councillor Shenton?
For.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd Bay?
For.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd Bay?
For.
Councillor Caroline Smith?
For.
Councillor Chris Smith? Councillor Wayne Smith?
For.
Councillor Bill Soane?
For.
Councillor Swaddle?
For.
Councillor Shahid Yunus?
For.
Recommendations carried. Agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 93, whole council elections. Do we have a proposer? Councillor Hussell, do you have a seconder, please? Councillor Kaiser. Can you speak, please, Councillor Hussell?
The only reason we are here is to serve our residents. We must be the best we can be. Local authorities can only be as effective, relevant and vibrant as its councillors. It is our duty to know our residents and be an integral part of the community. Being a member is not a sinecure or a nice addition to your income. You should be a go-to person for issues and concerns. An integrated councillor will anticipate these issues. This is only possible if you know those who you are representing and they identify with you. If wards are not aligned to communities, the member will tend to represent the views of his or her political affiliation rather than those of the residents. Do we really want this? We are local politicians who should not be driven by national parties or politics. We should be fiercely independent, concentrating on the well-being of our residents and proudly local. What is crucial is no member can know 10,000 people, but a ward member can know 3,000 or a parish. To be most effective, we must know our communities. 33 of our members are in 3-member wards, so the likely outcome of any member's poll is to continue with the status quo. Regrettably, that is not possible. The arguments are that it is better to be in a pack. If you lose your seat, you can have another go next year. We can concentrate on a particular ward, but they are all a disservice to democracy. The relationship between the electorate and member should be direct. The electorate must be able to dismiss a poor member. Being in a pack only allows weak members to do little. The sad reality is the larger the ward, the less democratic it is, and the more likely it is to reflect national parties rather than wishes of local residents. There is a tangible cost at greater than 316,000, which is desperately needed at this particular time. But there is a greater intangible cost. The disruption of an election, including PERDA, impacts the council's decision-making for more than 2 months every year. That means a portion of the council goes on hold. The payroll of the council is some 70 million, and extremely view would suggest 1/6, 12 million is wasted. I would not subscribe to this view, but I regard the Chief Financial Officer's view of £1 million per annum is extremely conservative. We have an opportunity, ladies and gentlemen, to lock in democracy and representation to make this council even better than it is and save a great deal of money. Let's not waste this opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hussell. Councillor Kaiser, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
No, I'd like to speak now, Mr. Mayor, if I may. I mean, my view is really around the money. I mean, we've heard speaking tonight all the marvellous things that will be done if other parties were in power. Well, to do that, you do need money, guys. Sorry to tell you that, but it's a fact of life. You need money, right? And if you spend this money on your own vanity, political vanity, I'm quite prepared to stand up for the election every 4 years and say, have we done a good job? If you haven't, kick us all out. I'm not frightened. I just think you guys are.
Thank you, Councillor Kaiser. Councillor Conway.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you perhaps see from this sheet on your desks, I have an amendment which I wish to propose. I won't read out the amendment. You can see it. We did provide this amendment to the ruling group in advance of this meeting, so they have had chance to reflect on it. I was somewhat disappointed to hear the leader of the council expressing a very clear preference for what he would like to see coming out of this consultation. I had hoped we would see a somewhat more statesmanlike approach to this, which would have tried to present a balanced picture. Instead, unfortunately, we got a very one-sided picture from the leader of council and various unnecessary party political points. I propose this amendment merely to offer what I believe to be a more balanced and fairer assessment of the advantages of each of the two options for consideration in this consultation, not just for one, but for each of them. And of course, those two
options are moving to 4 yearly all-out election cycle or maintaining the existing election by thirds. This amendment removes an inaccurate reference on page 221 of our agenda to greater fairness in the all-out election option. My seconder, who has identified this problem, will be explaining why we believe this is an inaccurate reference when she speaks. I should say that my amendment also adds an important argument to that section. That's the section on the benefits of an all-out election about the longer term perspective. That's omitted from the current wording, which seems to me a missed opportunity. I've changed the ordering of the points in the elections by third section, and I've dropped a point that seems to me of very little importance to the public, namely the reference to the impact on smaller political parties on page 222. Now, I would emphasise that I am not endeavouring in what I say or in this amendment to prejudge this matter. I want to give the consultees the maximum opportunity to reflect in a balanced way on the benefits of each of the two alternatives. I hope that is a perfectly reasonable approach and that colleagues across the council chamber will approach this as a constructive attempt to make this consultation more effective, fairer and more balanced. And I look to colleagues on all sides of the chamber to support this very reasoned and, I have to say, in my view, very reasonable amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Conway. Councillor Burgess, do you want to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll speak now, actually. Thank you. Yeah, I support this whole amendment. I just wanted to focus on the reference that Councillor Conway mentioned on page 221 in the benefits of all-out election section. So this is a reference to voters currently being given a different number of opportunities to vote. So this needs to be removed from the consultation wording because it's completely irrelevant. There's no scenario going forward where there will be this inequity in the number of chances to vote. Either we'll be under all-out elections where everyone gets to vote once every 4 years, or we'll elect in thirds. And the paper clearly states that if that is the case, we will move to 3-member wards throughout. So everyone, again, will get the same number of chances to vote. So this detail needs to be removed. It's shown as a benefit of all outs at the moment, but it's entirely redundant, whatever decision is made. It's not a factor to consider, and it's therefore misleading. This vote tonight, can I remind people, it's about the consultation. It's not about taking sides. So this amendment, I believe, presents a more balanced assessment of both options. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. Councillor Halsall, will you accept the amendment or do we need to debate it?
No, I wouldn't accept the amendment.
Thank you very much. All those who wish to speak to the amendment, please put your hands up. Is there anybody in David Hicks that wishes to speak to this amendment?
No, thank you.
And finally, anybody on virtual who wishes to speak, any councillor wishes to speak to this amendment? Okay, no.
Just clarify that I have a right of reply.
Unfortunately, you don't.
Oh, right. Well, thank you for that.
Don't blame the messenger. So, Councillor Bray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this amendment for one simple reason, because whatever the subject, if you're going to consult people, then you should make sure you do so in a fair way, which ensures that the results are valid. Now, I have literally, and I mean literally in its proper meaning, lost count of the number of times we've criticised the Conservatives for the way they have run consultations in the past. And usually our complaint has been that there has been little point in consulting when the administration has already made its mind up. And I'm afraid that this proposed consultation shows the same thing happening again. And indeed, both the leader and deputy leader of the council have both told us that they've made their mind up already. So instead of genuinely asking people to express a preference based on the full implications and all the pros and cons and the accurate pros and cons, as we've heard Councillor Burgess described, one is completely redundant that's mentioned. All the pros and cons of all up elections every 4 years versus elections in thirds. Your proposed wording is not so much just nudging people to opt for yearly elections, but giving them a great big shove in that direction. And that's not consultation. It's an attempt to manipulate the situation to try to ensure you get the answer you have already decided that you want. And what residents might actually prefer doesn't come into it. And as a result, I'm afraid this consultation is just going to be a sham.
Thank you, Councillor Bray. Is there anybody else in the chamber that wishes to speak? Otherwise, Councillor Horsell has Councillor Fruin.
Just like to support that last statement. If we look at how we consult with our residents, and if we are serious about residents, us being a golden thread for everything that our residents do, we should provide them with all options in a clear and balanced way. And I think this amendment actually does that.
Thank you, Councillor Fruin. Councillor Hulsell, as the proposer of the original motion, you have a right to reply on the amendment.
I won't object to the abuse, but let me be clear at the outset that the wording of the consultation has not been drafted by me or anybody on my party. It's been drafted by the monitoring officer. I have had no input at all. I didn't want to interfere with what should be a third party who is setting out the consultation. I don't want to interfere with the careful and considered work that he has undertaken. It wouldn't be right. So those accusations are really unbelievable. I can't support this amendment because simply it's riddled with inaccuracies and would mean putting information in the consultation for our residents, which is simply not true. Firstly, election by thirds is not the current electoral system for Wokingham Borough. 21 out of the 54 seats are not elected in thirds. So 14 out of 25 wards have elections either every 2 years or every 4 years. Secondly, I don't understand how having elections 3 out of every 4 years furthers democracy. Our Liberal Democrats saying that 36 of 52 unitaries, almost 70%, which use all-out elections, are not democratic. Well, this bad news for the Liberal Democrat administration running Bath and North East Somerset Council, which holds, you guessed it, all-out elections every 4 years. Thirdly, election by thirds does not, as this amendment claims, create greater stability in terms of membership, since by its own admission, elections would be more frequently in every part of the borough. So there's actually more chance of a turnover and not less chance than control for the council could change hands as it should be. Finally, it's a nonsense to talk about the cost of only one election under thirds compared to all-out elections. We can't just cancel election in year 2 of the election third cycle if we think there isn't space in the budget. You can't escape the fact that the cost for electing all councillors under thirds is higher than it is for all-outs. I'm loath to cast aspersions.
I wanted a point of personal explanation under Standing Order 4.2.13.14, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Holsall just quoted part of the amendment, which he said was shouldn't be there, and it related to the greater stability of the council in terms of its membership. Those are the words of the monitoring officer.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Horsell, will you continue, please?
I'm loath to cast aspirations. One wonders if there are alternatives. Whatever the case, I believe that we should let our residents come to their own fair conclusion. I urge council to reject this spin and back the document produced by our impartial monitoring officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horsell. We'll now move to the vote as before. It's recorded. And on the amendment, yes, absolutely. This is just on the amendment. So, David Hicks, I can see they're beginning to move.
On the amendment,
Against.
Councillor Baker,
Abstain.
Councillor Bath, Councillor Bishop Firth. For. Councillor Blumenthal,
Against.
Councillor Bowring,
Against.
Councillor Boyd,
For.
Councillor Bray,
For.
Councillor Burgess,
For.
Councillor Chadwick, Councillor Cheng,
Against.
Councillor Conway,
For.
Councillor Cunnington,
Against.
Councillor Dennis,
For.
Councillor Ferris,
For.
Councillor Firmager,
Against.
Councillor Fishwick,
For.
Councillor Fruin,
For.
Councillor G,
For.
Councillor Granderson,
Against.
Councillor Halsall,
Against.
Councillor Hare, Councillor Hellish Salmons,
Against.
Councillor Jones,
For.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen,
Against.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen,
Against.
Councillor Kaiser,
Against.
Councillor Kerr,
For.
Councillor Loys,
Against.
Councillor Maher,
For.
Councillor Malvern,
For.
Councillor Charles Magetts,
Against.
Councillor Rebecca Magetts,
Against.
Councillor Mather,
For.
Councillor Mickleby,
For.
Councillor Monroe,
Against.
Councillor Murray,
Against.
Councillor Rance,
Against.
Councillor Ross,
Against.
Councillor Sargent,
Against.
Councillor Shenton,
For.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd Bay,
For.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd Bay,
For.
Councillor Caroline Smith,
For.
Chris Smith, Councillor Wayne Smith,
Against.
Councillor Bill Soane,
Against.
Councillor Swaddle,
Against.
Councillor Eunice.
Against.
Amendment not agreed.
Thank you. So now we go back to the substantive proposal. So does anybody wish to speak? Councillor Conway, anybody else? Councillor Halsall, you have a right to reply later. Is there anybody in David Hicks that wishes to? Okay. Anybody on virtual who wishes to speak to this unamended proposal? No. So while we're waiting for them, I will call Councillor Conway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm very sorry, of course, that the amendment I proposed was rejected on what looks like a party vote. That's a great shame, but it is what's happened. And I'm afraid as a result of that, it is extremely difficult for us to support this proposal now. We cannot really, in all conscience, support a proposal that, in our view, contains an inaccuracy, a material inaccuracy about the benefits of one of the options that is included in this recommendation. So I'm afraid we will have to vote against this, even though we support the idea of a consultation wholeheartedly, but we cannot support a consultation which contains inaccurate information.
Thank you, Councillor Conway. Is there anybody else in the room wishes to speak other than Councillor Halsall? Anybody in David Hicks wishing to speak to the unamended proposal?
No, thank you.
No, they've gone back in. Well, they should have gone back in. So I'm going to move on to this. So, Councillor Halsall, you have the right of reply.
Well, first of all, I must find it very difficult how the Lib Dems all voted together, and that's not a party vote. Very strange. But there you go. The reason that it's been drafted by a third party, which is who is an officer,
A point of personal explanation, Standing Order 4.2.13.14. The Leader of the Council just claimed that because the Liberal Democrats voted for it, it was a party vote. What he perhaps failed to recognise is
sorry,
the Liberal Democrats...
excuse me, Councillor Conway. That's not a point of personal explanation. I'm sorry.
Well, I was about to say that the Liberal Democrats, the Labour Party and the Independents all voted for the amendment.
So carry on, Councillor Hussle.
For a consultation to be unbiased, it has to be drafted by a third party. And it has been drafted by a third party, which is an officer of the council. I actually tend to believe the officers of the council. I know the opposition is firing two shots, one saying that they think the officers of the council are wonderful, and then they're critical of the officers of the council. I do not think the consultation should be prepared by you, Stephen, or me. And it hasn't been. It's been prepared by a third party. So when you're criticising the inaccuracies or otherwise, you're criticising inaccuracies or otherwise of a third party. And I regret to say that you're wrong to do so. You put this council into disrepute.
I'm afraid that does require a personal explanation. Understanding Order 4.2.13.14. I at no point attempted to criticise the officers. I would remind the Leader of the Council that it is very common for members to have a view on consultation documents and to suggest amendments to them. This happened recently in the Personnel Board, which you chaired and I was a member of. So this is not an unusual thing. This is not a criticism of the integrity of officers. Far from it. It is an attempt to improve a consultation. That's all.
Thank you, Councillor Conway. That is absolutely what a point of personal explanation is. Well done. So, Councillor Horsell?
But with respect, you said it was inaccurate. And that is a statement of the validity of the advice. So I don't accept what you're saying. I do recommend the paper to the electoral arrangement to the council. And I reckon, as I said, the council launched consultation with stakeholders on moving to a whole electoral cycle. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hossel. We'll move to the vote. It's recorded again. So, David Hicks room, please.
This is voting on the original recommendation. Councillor Akhtar.
For.
Councillor Baker.
Abstain.
Councillor Bath.
For.
Councillor Bishop-Firth.
Against.
Councillor Blumenthal.
For.
Councillor Bowring.
For.
Councillor Boyt.
For.
Councillor Bray.
Definitely against.
Councillor Burgess.
For.
Councillor Chadwick. Councillor Cheng.
For.
Councillor Conway.
Against.
Councillor Cunnington.
For.
Councillor Dennis.
Against.
Councillor Ferris.
Against.
Councillor Firmager.
For.
Councillor Fishwick.
Against.
Councillor Fruin.
For.
Councillor G.
Against.
Councillor Grandison.
For.
Councillor Halsall.
For.
Councillor Hare. Councillor Helly Simons.
For.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor Kaiser.
For.
Councillor Kerr.
Against.
Councillor Loys.
For.
Councillor Maher.
Against.
Councillor Malvern.
Against.
Councillor Charles McGetts.
For.
Councillor Rebecca McGetts.
For.
Councillor Mather.
Against.
Councillor Mickleborough.
Against.
Councillor Monroe.
For.
Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Rance.
For.
Councillor Ross.
For.
Councillor Sargent.
For.
Councillor Shenton.
Against.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd de Bay.
Against.
Councillor Michelle Shepherd de Bay.
Very against.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
Against.
Councillor Chris Smith. Councillor Wainsmith,
For.
Councillor Bilsone,
For.
Councillor Swaddle,
4.
Councillor Eunice.
4.
Recommendation agreed.
Right, we move on to item 94, changes to the Constitution. Do we have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Munro. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Kaiser. So, Councillor Munro, would you make your speech, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This time of the evening, late hour, I won't go into far too much detail. We've had many meetings of this group. I think that the monitoring officer has laid out all of the 10 sections, and I think, broadly speaking, most of them have been agreed in our working group, and I think it has a sanction of the members of that party, although I believe there may be one or two that certain members have brought to my attention this afternoon that they would like to discuss. I think the deadline for member questions, if I can just go through them briefly, Mr. Mayor, the idea of the officers really was to recommend that the deadline for public and member questions related to the agenda items and urgent matters be changed to 10 a.m. 2 days before instead of 1. Now, we weren't quite sure that's going to work, but that was an officer's suggestion. The second one is a question that was raised by a member of the public asking should supplementary questions with written answers. We discussed that and we did amend some of the words, but we agreed that we would put it as laid out in page 225. Consideration of motions. We've had a lot of talk about this, and it was about what happened at our last council meeting, where we were right at the end of time and deciding what the correct rules should be about when a vote should be called. I think that's fairly self-explanatory. Number 6 stated that concerned had officer impact on council's finances. The idea here and the rationale behind this was that if we agreed to a motion, we might be actually committing the council to something that hadn't been properly costed. And so that's why we asked the head of legal, in conjunction with our monitoring officer, to come up with some words that might cover that. And they're at the bottom of page 227 and at the top of page 228. The planning committee one where the result would be given at the planning committee rather than waiting for the written report, so that was clearer. School transport appeals panel, and the idea of this was to increase the pool of membership so that we had a bit more of a base to go from. The ethics and corporate governance had already been agreed by the standards committee, and so therefore that was agreed. And the final piece really was agreeing the delegation to the monitoring officer to change 2 parts of the constitution that made sense, rather than going back to the debate every time. Some of these meetings were quite rarely difficult to diary in the calendar, and so it's so much so the last one occurred at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening. So I would recommend these recommendations to the council, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Councillor Kaiser, do you want to speak now, or is that all right?
No, I'll speak now. I'd just like to reiterate what Councillor Munro has just said. I'm also, maybe I have to declare an interest. I'm chairman of the Standards Board. I must admit, I do like these changes. We've had the unedifying apparition of councillors telling us, at least 2 councillors, that don't believe that the Standards Board should be doing anything. It's got no power and everything else. And I must admit, I see that board working very well across, not only with independents, but cross-party. And it's a terrible shame that if councillors think they can just get away with that, so anything that toughens up the Standards Board, as far as I'm concerned, gets my support.
Thank you, Councillor Kaiser. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Councillor Kerr?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was shocked when I first read the 6th recommendation in this item. I do understand the need to have transparency over cost implications of decisions made in this council chamber, although I would argue about the definition of a significant sum of money. £1,000 in terms of personal finances is a significant sum of money, but to suggest that £1,000 for a multi-million-pound organisation is significant doesn't seem quite right. I want this council to consider the negative consequences of this suggested amendment to the Constitution. We would not have declared a climate emergency. We still do not know the full cost implications of this declaration. Does that mean we shouldn't have made this declaration? It will, of course, have a significant impact on council finances, but setting the strategic priority of this council is what was key here. Actions to come out of this declaration require being fully costed, and that includes carbon savings assessments as well. But the principle of taking the council down this path was crucial, and this constitutional amendment would have prohibited us from doing that. I'm requesting, please, that the chairman of the Constitution Review Working Group removes recommendation 6 on the agenda tonight and takes it back to the committee for further discussion, taking on board my concerns. When this is discussed again, I would also like the committee to consider the fact that currently many councillors in this chamber may wish to raise issues that matter to the people of Wokingham through a motion, but do not have full access to council officers to produce the costings. I would like the committee to consider that sending a motion to the executive to debate, without it having been debated in full council first, to understand the views from non-executive members is undemocratic. All this amendment is doing is moving the ability to debate important issues from the sovereign body of this council to the executive, which is not representative of the makeup of this council. I hope that an alternative proposal that fixes the perceived problems that this constitutional amendment is trying to address can be devised and brought back at a later date, having fully considered all the implications. Mr. Mayor, providing recommendation 6 goes back to the Constitution Review Working Group for revision, could I ask that recommendations 1, 2 and 3 are voted on as a block separately to the other recommendations, please? Should the recommendation 6 not go back, then I would like to include recommendation 6 with 1, 2, 3 in the block vote, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I just need to consult. Is that formal? Right. Are you making that a formal amendment? If you do, then we need a seconder. So we've got a seconder. We need the opportunity now for anybody who wishes to speak. Yes, sorry. Yeah, the seconder, would you like to speak? No.
Do I speak on just the change or the whole?
No, the amendment.
The amendment. Okay.
Just the amendment.
I think, well, I'm sort of very glad that if we can split this up, because there are many things we can support here, but there are some things, there are many things we can support here, but there are some things that we can't. I mean, our Lib Dem councillors can support items 94.1. This is because it reduces the amount of time available for councillors to raise questions around urgent items of importance or items appearing on the meeting
Excuse
agenda.
me, Councillor Shepherd Bay. Can you speak to the amendment, which is only relevant
only
to
6, right?
only
okay.
6? You can give your speech later.
Sure. I know there are concerns about 94.6. This forces motions to be fully costed before they are heard. Sarah has already talked about this, and I can see what it was trying to do, but not all of the things that this council should be doing can possibly be costed in advance. And the 100,000 and the £1,000 threshold is really not high enough. And I think that is where the problem lies with this.
Thank you, Councillor. Does there anybody want to speak? Stuart, Councillor Munro, do you accept the amendment?
Mr. Mayor, I hear what's being said, but we spent a lot of time discussing this, and we asked our experts, our monitoring officer and our head of legal, to look at the item and come up with some sensible words. Now, whether it's 10,000 or 1,000, I don't think that would make a difference. So, personally, I think the group made a decision. Yeah, we I think it would be best to try this and see how it goes. What it's trying to do is it's trying to make it more of a sort of constitutional control.
Can you come to a conclusion, please? It's either yes or no.
But therefore, I'd have to say no.
Thank you very much. Now, anybody who wishes to speak, we've got Councillor Burgess ready. Anybody else wishing to speak to this amendment? Anybody in the David Hicks?
No, thank you.
And anybody on virtual? Councillor Burgess.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really alarmed when I saw number 6. It's really anti-democratic, and it obviously, as we've heard, it takes power from and decision making away from full council and shoves it to executive. And £1,000 with an expenditure budget we've seen in the paper tonight of 630 million. That is minuscule. Anything of that level to be just stopped in its tracks and sent to the executive. I just think it's really anti-democratic and it's just wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. So there's nobody else who wishes to speak. Then Councillor Munro, you have the right to reply on the amendment.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor's probably doing that before. I mean, I think we should give this a go. I think we should go with what we've got. We've had expert advice. I get the points that are being made, and if it's a real problem, then we can review it again, and maybe come up with a different number. But I think we've gone around this loop for so long that we should go with what is proposed.
Thank you very much. So I'm now going to move to a vote on the amendment.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, could somebody repeat the amendment?
The amendment, as I understand it, is to ask CRWG to reconsider recommendation 6. So in other words, recommendation 6 is sent back and not voted on today. So we're going to go to the vote. David Hicks are coming.
Against. Councillor Baker.
Abstain.
Councillor Barr.
Against.
Councillor Bishop Firth. For. Councillor Blumenthal.
Against.
Councillor Bowring.
Against.
Councillor Boyd.
For.
Councillor Bray. For. Councillor Burgess.
For.
Councillor Chadwick. Councillor Cheng.
Against.
Councillor Conway.
For.
Councillor Cunnington.
Against.
Councillor Dennis.
For.
Councillor Ferris.
For.
Councillor Firmager.
Against.
Councillor Fishwick.
For.
Councillor Fruin.
For.
Councillor G.
For.
Councillor Grandison.
Against.
Councillor Halsall.
Against.
Councillor Hare. Councillor Hello Simons.
Against.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
Against.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
Against.
Councillor Kaiser.
Against.
Councillor Kerr.
For.
Councillor Loys.
Against.
Councillor Maher.
For.
Councillor Malvern.
For.
Councillor Charles McGetts.
Against.
Councillor Rebecca McGetts.
Against.
Councillor Mather.
For.
Councillor Mickleby.
For.
Councillor Monroe.
Against.
Councillor Murray.
Against.
Councillor Rance.
Against.
Councillor Ross.
Against.
Councillor Sargent.
Against.
Councillor Shenton.
For.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd Bay.
For.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd Bay. Councillor Caroline Smith.
For.
Councillor Chris Smith. Councillor Wayne Smith.
Against.
Councillor Bill Soane.
Against.
Councillor Swaddle.
Against.
Councillor Eunice.
Against.
Amendment not agreed.
So we now go back to the original, and can people go back into the David Hicks room, please? So we will now debate the original proposal as not amended. So hands up those who wish to speak. Okay. Anybody on virtual, County Councillor, wishing to speak, please raise your hand. Nope. And then I'll come back to David Hicks. So we have Councillor Shepherd Bay.
Sorry about that. Yes. Okay. Can I clarify, is this going to be a split vote or do we have to vote on the whole thing?
What we're doing at the moment is just debating.
Okay.
It may well end up as a split vote if somebody proposes it, but it hasn't actually happened. Okay.
She did
So-
actually, and I seconded it. So.
Well, yeah. Okay. Just carry on, please.
Okay. I mean, it'd be good if this was a split vote because there are many things that we can support here, but there are some things that we can't. Our Liberal Democrat councillors can't support 94.1. This is because it reduces the amount of time available for councillors to raise questions around urgent items of importance or items appearing on a meeting agenda. It might it might have been acceptable for the agenda to be released a little earlier to compensate, but it seems that may not be, that was not an option. If we are to be a democratic society, we do need to ensure that everyone gets a chance to question what is going on in our meetings. On item 94.2, we do think it's important for written answers to be published so everyone can see. And this should be answers that were sent that were asked as supplementary ones and sent out as supplementary ones. It shouldn't matter that it's a written reply. On 94.3, it's a difficult one. While it is common for councillors to vote the same way if they supported an amendment, it should not be as a given. It was shown just now, and perhaps it is still better to continue with simply asking if anyone wants to vote differently other than the amended motion as we have done before moving on. 94.4 is welcome, along with 94.5. We have concerns about 94.6, as you heard with our amendment, but I won't dwell on that one. 94.7 on planning information, this sounds sensible and is welcome. Item 94.8, we welcome the widening of the scope of people who can do school transport appeals. We realise it can be difficult to get people to volunteer for these as they are done during the working day, so more people to choose from will help. And most of all, item 94.9 is very welcome amendment. It creates a more neutral and transparent complaints process when dealing with complaints that are made against our councillors. This item was unanimously agreed by our Standards Committee, which is made up of members of all parties, plus town and parish councillors. As has been said many times, we should be protecting the innocent and not the guilty. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd-Debay. So, Councillor Burrow?
Can I cite, Standing Order 4.1.12M and ask for an extension of the meeting for an extra half hour, please?
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Conway. We'll go straight to the vote. All those in favour for the extension, please show. All those against? And any abstentions? I have not called in the David Hicks. I'm assuming all leaders are happy with that. Thank you. Right, so we will be extending. So where are we? I just wanted clarity. Are you saying that just you want a separate vote on 6 and the rest can be taken on block, or what? Could you clarify precisely what split you want?
Yes, we would like to vote on 1, 2, 3 and 6 as a block, please, and then 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So at least we know about the split vote. Stuart, you've got a right to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I said earlier, there's a fairly difficult situation sometimes when we agree one thing in a meeting and then we find ourselves debating it again in here. But on this question of number 6, I actually actually know that I was contacted and we discussed this afternoon. But I think as far as some of the other ones are concerned, I mean, we openly discussed those. I'd just like to point out one thing on 6 before we vote. And that is that although it's referred to the executive, it does come back to the next council.
Councillor Monroe, can you just stop?
Can I make a point of personal explanation? We did not agree in this meeting. I'm the only person in that meeting who isn't a Conservative.
Excuse me, that's not a point of personal.
It is. I make it because he's saying
no.
we agreed it in the meeting and we.
He said we. It didn't say you. Point of personal explanation is specifically to a councillor, not to
I'm
a
part
group.
of that meeting.
No. I've made my ruling, okay, and I hope you will respect it. Carry on, Councillor Monroe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really, that's all I wanted to say. And even if we take 6 as is and we vote for it, it's going to the executive to come to the next council meeting, as I said. So I don't see really why we shouldn't give it a try. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. So we are going to take 1, 2, 3 and 6 first. So can David Hicks get ready, please? And it'll be a recorded vote again as normal. While we're waiting, can I just ask if you do have an amendment, it is helpful for at least Democratic Services to know that it's coming. doing it on the fly can be difficult.
I spoke with Anne today about it.
Okay.
So, and I actually spoke with Councillor Munro
Right,
about
okay.
it as well, actually.
I'm just making a general point. Thank you.
Councillor Aptar.
For.
Councillor Baker.
Abstain.
Councillor Bath.
For.
Councillor Bishop Firth.
Against.
Councillor Blumenthal.
For.
Councillor Bowering.
For.
Councillor Boyd.
Against.
Councillor Bray.
Against.
Councillor Burgess.
Against.
Councillor Chadwick. Councillor Cheng.
For.
Councillor Conway.
Against.
Councillor Cunnington.
For.
Councillor Dennis.
Against.
Councillor Ferris.
Against.
Councillor Firmager.
For.
Councillor Fishwick.
Against.
Councillor Fruin.
For.
Councillor G.
Against.
Councillor Grandison.
For.
Councillor Halsall.
For.
Councillor Hare. Councillor Hillier Simons.
For.
Councillor Jones.
Against.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor Kaiser.
For.
Councillor Kerr.
Against.
Councillor Loyes.
For.
Councillor Maher.
Against.
Councillor Malvern.
Against.
Councillor Charles Magetts.
For.
Councillor Rebecca Magetts.
For.
Councillor Adrian Mather.
Against.
Councillor Mickleborough.
Against.
Councillor Stuart Munro.
For.
Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Rance.
My name. Oh, for.
Councillor Ross.
For.
Councillor Sargent.
For.
Councillor Shenton.
Against.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd de Bay.
Against.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd de Bay.
Definitely again.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
Against.
Councillor Chris Smith. Councillor Wayne Smith.
For.
Councillor Bill Soane.
For.
Councillor Swaddle.
For.
Councillor Eunice.
For.
Recommendations 1, 2, 3 and 6 agreed.
Thank you. We'll move on to 4, 5, 7, 8, 9 and 10 for the recorded vote.
Councillor Akhtar.
For.
Councillor Baker.
Abstain.
Councillor Bath.
For.
Councillor Bishop Firth.
For.
Councillor Blumenthal.
For.
Councillor Bowering.
For.
Councillor Boyd.
For.
Councillor Bray.
For.
Councillor Burgess.
For.
Councillor Chadwick. Councillor Cheng.
For.
Councillor Conway.
For.
Councillor Cunnington.
For.
Councillor Dennis.
For.
Councillor Ferris.
For.
Councillor Firmager.
For.
Councillor Fishwick.
For.
Councillor Fruin.
For.
Councillor G.
For.
Councillor Grandison.
For.
Councillor Halsall.
For.
Councillor Hare. Councillor Hillier Simons.
For.
Councillor Jones.
For.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
For.
Councillor Kaiser.
For.
Councillor Kerr.
For.
Councillor Loyes.
For.
Councillor Maher.
For.
Councillor Malvern.
For.
Councillor Charles Magetts.
For.
Councillor Rebecca Magetts.
For.
Councillor Adrian Mather.
For.
Councillor Mickleborough.
For.
Councillor Munro.
For.
Councillor Murray.
For.
Councillor Rance. Councillor Ross.
For.
Councillor Sargent.
For.
Councillor Shenton.
For.
Imogen Shepherd de Bay.
For.
Rochelle Shepherd de Bay.
For.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
For.
Councillor Chris Smith. Councillor Wayne Smith.
For.
Councillor Bill Soane.
For.
Councillor Swaddle.
For.
Councillor Eunice.
For.
Recommendations agreed.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 95, the Optalis contract renewal 2022. Do we have a proposer? Councillor Cunningham. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Hare. Thank you very much. Councillor Cunnington, would you like to speak, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Optilis was, of course, conceived with all the right intentions and has evolved into a joint organisation in conjunction with the Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead to provide adult care services across both authorities and share as many of the corporate and operational costs as possible in order to provide value for money. It's fair to say that time moves on. The objectives of the two local authorities remain broadly the same. However, the construct of Optilis was unfavourable to Wokingham Borough Council, and this has to change. It's also fair to say that whilst Optilis has had its supporters and its performance hasn't been all bad, it also hasn't delivered what we want for our residents in Wokingham as well as it could have, especially early. 3 years ago, Optilis had a strategic ambition, an ambition of big expansion. There was an aim to take over services from many other authorities and to grow fast. You could say the aim was to be the Amazon of local authority social care. But now is the time to review Optilis, its operation and its values and performance and its strategy. After all, the world of adult social care doesn't stand still. New challenges arise, new national and local expectations arise, and this administration rightly expects our services to be reviewed and honed alongside and to take on board these changes. It's necessary to reset the strategic focus of Optilis. Concentration should be on the quality of services to the residents of Wokingham Borough and to be more efficient overall. Growth should no longer be a strategic aim as it was not delivering the results in the way that was envisaged. We've completed 2 years of negotiations with RBWM to get to this point. What you see before you is the new shareholder agreement and the contract renewal, which enables it. If this agreement is voted through tonight, we can start to see the benefits of what has been agreed with RBWM. Optilis needs a nimble and agile approach to be able to respond quickly to challenges and to keep it on a smooth course. Therefore, the agreed board structure has been slimmed down. It has one board rather than two to meet that ambition and allow quicker, better decision making. The board members are the lead members of both authorities and the directors of adult services. This means we have direct operational control of the company. We can set service priorities and aim to suit the needs of the shareholders and our residents. Board meetings can now focus on strategic and management discussions rather than corporate presentations. A separation of structures means services in Wokingham are run independently of our BWM, giving more flexibility and independence for Wokingham Borough Council. The right of WBC to end Wokingham Borough Council to exit the contract without punitive costs, should it choose in the future, we need a different route, can be achieved easily. And this incentivises Optilis to design its services to suit our needs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunnington. Councillor Hare, do you want to speak now or reserve? You're right.
Can I speak now, please? This recommendation is one that I believe we can all confidently agree. First, I would like to say how pleased and impressed I am by David Birch as head of Optilis. He brings understanding, sensitivity and care to a difficult, sometimes unpopular task. I know that he also works in unison with Matt Pope, Director of Adult Services. We have in the care field 2 excellent directors who are concerned to do the best for the people of Wokingham. It's great that under the new governance, Matt is on the board of Optilis. I really can't see why this was not on the agenda from the start. It seems so important that the council works with Optilis for the benefit of local residents. I would also like to say it's great that David Birch has identified things that need improving with Optilis, such as the task sheets becoming interactive, and is working on these. He is also bringing technological innovation to the work appropriately for the benefit of users. I'd also like to underline the advantage of the recently formed specialist peripatetic team, working in partnership with the council to support local providers, deliver an effective care strategy with experienced staff who are well trained. This team can provide necessary care in an agile, effective manner that works especially well in crisis situations. I would like to thank both Matt Pope and David Birch for the excellent job they're doing with and for the people of Wokingham, and I recommend this motion to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hare. Does anybody wish to speak to this at all? I can't see any hands. Anybody in? David Hicks wishes to speak?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Councillor Boyd is just making her way.
Councillor Boyd, will you go ahead?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I want to obviously support this motion, but what I wanted to do was just to focus a little bit on the staff who are at the sharp end, the staff of Optilist who are the ones who are going out caring for our elderly and our disabled people, and I've had some experience of that myself. And many of these people are the lowest paid, some of the lowest paid people in the borough. And I'm sure that Optalis will be paying the national living wage of £9.50 an hour to those employees who are over 23. And whilst I appreciate that nothing can be done at this point, I really would like the council to consider going forward that we look at paying the real living wage, which is 40 pence an hour more than the national living wage. And although 40 pence an hour doesn't sound very much, to these lowly paid people living in an expensive borough like Wokingham, that kind of increase could be the difference between just about managing and slipping into poverty. And I think that this could form part of the council's anti-poverty strategy, where we look at how much we are paying our lowest paid workers. So I just ask that that could be something that's considered going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Is there anybody on virtual who wishes to speak to this? Can't see anything. So a right of reply back to Councillor Cunnington.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I take on board what Councillor Boyd has mentioned, and we're all very conscious of the fact that there is a competition which is insatiable for these very important staff that, as she describes, are at the sharp end. And I think that we want to make sure that we run this service as efficiently as possible in order that we can make the very best offers to our staff to keep them and to properly reward them. Over the last years, as a result of the proposed changes, it's about £2.5 million of payments from Optilist come back to WBC by the efficiency drives and the refocusing that I talked about earlier. So the plan future is to use Optilist as a service provider, which means we can design adult services to suit our needs and to use Optilist contracts to hedge against fluctuating care costs from other providers in the care market. We will gain financial stability, especially with current stability in the care market due to rising inflation. And the elephant that's been mentioned so many times before, which seems to be the only financial thing that was understood over there, which are the potential adult social care reforms. So Optilist will be a vital tool to help us design services for the future and keep some financial control on our costs. And with the current developments in adult social care at national government level, this couldn't be more timely.
Thank you, Councillor Cunnington. Councillors in David Hicks, we're going to go to the vote now, please. There will be a recorded vote.
Councillor Akhtar.
For.
Councillor Baker.
Abstain.
Councillor Bath.
For.
Councillor Bishop-Firth. 4. Councillor Blumenthal. 4. Councillor Bowering.
4.
Councillor Boyd.
4.
Councillor Bray. 4. Councillor Burgess. 4. Councillor Chadwick. 4. Councillor Chang. Councillor Conway.
4. Sorry.
4.
Sorry. Councillor Cunnington.
4.
Councillor Dennis.
4.
Councillor Ferris.
4.
Councillor Firmager.
4.
Councillor Fishwick.
4.
Councillor Fruin.
4.
Councillor G.
4.
Councillor Granderson.
4.
Councillor Halsall. Councillor Hare. Councillor Hellier-Simons. 4. Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
4.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
4.
Councillor Kaiser.
4.
Councillor Kerr.
4.
Councillor Loyes.
4.
Councillor Maher.
4.
Councillor Malvern. Councillor Maggett. Sorry. Councillor Charles Maggett. Oh, yes, sorry. Okay, thank you. Councillor Rebecca Maggett.
4.
Councillor Adrian Mather.
Against.
Councillor Mickleby.
4.
Councillor Monroe.
4.
Councillor Murray.
4.
Councillor Rance.
4.
Councillor Ross.
4.
Councillor Sargent.
4.
Councillor Shenton.
4.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd Bay.
4.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd Bay.
4.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
4.
Councillor Chris Smith. Councillor Wayne Smith.
4.
Councillor Bill Stone.
4.
Councillor Swaddle.
4.
Councillor Eunice.
4.
The recommendation carried.
Thank you. And we move on to the final item, item 96, Central and Eastern Joint Minerals and Waste Plan. Do we have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Smith. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Jones. Okay. So would you like to speak now, please, Councillor Smith?
Right. Okay. The minerals plan was held in public with the examiner back in September and October in the Royal Borough in their offices, and there were a number of modifications. They're set out in pages 317 to pages 317 to 428. I just would like to remind you this is a joint plan between us, the Royal Borough, Bracknell and Reading. The modifications that would potentially interest the councillors here this evening, the 3 modifications are the Brookside Business Park that was a potential waste site identified in Appendices A of the joint plan. Due to the increased flood risk as a result of the latest modelling data, that has now been removed or suggested to be removed. Clarity around Star Works, Knoll Hill, is provided in Appendices E, MM78, and that site is proposed to be safeguarded. It is already a waste site, as a lot of you will know. And policy DM15, the operator past performance, has been reconsidered and renamed site history. It's better focus on land use and planning issues. So they're the only modifications. There's no sites being proposed that were proposed previously, and there's no new sites being proposed now. So it should be quite simple.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Jones.
I'll speak now, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to make the speech that Councillor Ferris would have made if he'd have been in the room. And it is as follows. Work on the minerals and waste plan for our area started in 2019, with much work having taken place and is now approaching its latter stages. The Liberal Democrat group support this plan going out for further consultation. We are pleased to note that there is now no gravel extraction in Shimfield and Arborfield area, that the Star Lane Knoll Hill site is now to be safeguarded for both minerals and waste use, and Brookside Business Park Swallowfield is to be removed as a preferred waste site. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Does anybody wish to speak? I can't see anybody in. David Hicks wishing to speak?
No, thank you.
And anybody on virtual? No, I can't see anything. Can the David Hicks people be ready to go? We're going into the right to reply right at the end. Councillor Smith? Oh, sorry. Somebody does want to speak.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a point of order under 4.2.13.1. If there's nobody speaking against, then we can go straight to the vote. Thank you. In the expediency of time.
Can I?
Right, you do get a right of reply. Councillor Smith, please carry on.
Sorry. I was only going to say, just to build on Clive's point, in the site, when this went in front of the examiner in September, and it was over lots of days, Bridge Farm was never ever considered as a site, and it's not now.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. We're going to go to the vote. Can the David Hicks people please form up, and we'll do the recorded vote.
Councillor Akhtar.
For.
Councillor Baker.
Abstain.
Councillor Bath.
For.
Councillor Bishop-Furr. 4. Councillor Blumenthal. 4. Councillor Bowering.
4.
Councillor Boyd.
4.
Councillor Bray. 4. Councillor Burgess. 4. Councillor Chadwick. Councillor Cheng. 4. Councillor Conway.
4.
Councillor Cunnington.
4.
Councillor Dennis.
4.
Councillor Ferris.
4.
Councillor Firmager.
4.
Councillor Fishwick.
4.
Councillor Fruin.
4.
Councillor G.
4.
Councillor Grandison.
4.
Councillor Halsall.
4.
Councillor Hare. Councillor Helly Simons.
4.
Councillor Jones.
4.
Councillor Norman Jorgensen.
4.
Councillor Pauline Jorgensen. 4. Councillor Kaiser.
Yeah, 4.
Councillor Kerr.
4.
Councillor Loys.
4.
Councillor Maher.
4.
Councillor Malvern.
4.
Councillor Charles McGetts.
4.
Councillor Rebecca McGetts.
4.
Councillor Mather.
4.
Councillor Mickleby.
4.
Councillor Monroe.
4.
Councillor Murray.
4.
Councillor Rance.
4.
Councillor Ross.
4.
Councillor Sargent.
4.
Councillor Shenton.
4.
Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Bay.
4.
Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Bay.
4.
Councillor Caroline Smith.
4.
Councillor Chris Smith. No. Councillor Wayne Smith.
4.
Councillor Soane.
4.
Councillor Swaddle.
4.
Councillor Eunice.
4.
Recommendations carried.
Thank you very much. Just please indulge me before I close the meeting. There has been, I want to give you clarity on points of personal explanation. Basically, Councillor Conway had it spot on. It is where you have made a speech in this chamber and someone else misinterprets what you said at that moment in time in the chamber. It's not what's outside this chamber. It's purely on the basis of a speech made here. And then you have a right to correct a misinterpretation of what you said, which was exactly what Councillor Conway did.
May I ask you a question on a point of clarity? What standing order should we use if something incorrect or misleading is said and it doesn't relate to something that's said in the chamber? How can we correct it?
I understand that that doesn't exist. So I would recommend if you want to correct that, you need to make a recommendation to CRWG in the normal way. So I now close the meeting. Thank you very much for all your hard efforts.